My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, had 2 million followers who thought she was a saint. To the world, she was the devoted mother of a sick child, a warrior fighting for her fragile daughter's life. But I knew something they didn't. I saw the fear in my granddaughter's eyes when the camera wasn't rolling. I smelled the antiseptic that clung to her skin instead of candy. So last Tuesday I did something drastic. I bought a teddy bear, cut it open, and hid a spy camera inside its glass eye. What I saw on my laptop screen that night made my blood run cold and forced me to dial 911 with shaking hands. But before I tell you what I saw, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had a gut feeling that saved a life. My name is Solomon. I am 70 years old, and I have seen enough of this world to know when something is rotting beneath the surface. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of crisp autumn day that usually makes you glad to be alive. I was parked outside the elementary school in my old Buick, waiting for my granddaughter Zoe. When the bell rang, children burst out like a dam breaking, screaming and laughing, full of energy. But then I saw her. Zoe walked slowly, her shoulders hunched under a backpack that looked too heavy for her. She is only 7, but she walked with the weariness of an old woman. I got out of the car and waved. "Hey there, sweet pea." She looked up and tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her face was gaunt, the skin pulled tight over her cheekbones. I noticed her school uniform hung loosely on her frame as if she had shrunk since the last time I saw her 2 weeks ago. I opened the car door for her, and she climbed in with a small grunt of effort. "I have a surprise for you," I said, trying to inject some joy into the heavy air. I reached into the cooler on the passenger seat and pulled out a chocolate ice cream bar, her favorite, or at least it used to be. Zoe's eyes went wide, but not with happiness. She recoiled against the door, pulling her knees up to her chest as if I had offered her a live snake. "No, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't. Mom says sugar is poison. Mom says if I eat that, my stomach will stop working and I will have to go back to the hospital." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Zoe, it is just ice cream. 1 bar won't hurt you." She shook her head violently, tears welling up in her large dark eyes. "Please, Grandpa, do not make me. If she smells it on me, she will be so mad. She says my body is too weak for regular food." I slowly lowered the ice cream. I looked at my granddaughter's hands. They were trembling. The skin was translucent, the veins blue and prominent like a road map of suffering. I reached out and gently took her hand. It was ice cold. I pulled her into a hug, hoping to comfort her, but what I smelled made me freeze. She didn't smell like playground dust or bubble gum. She smelled of rubbing alcohol and something metallic like old pennies. It was the smell of a hospital room clinging to a second grader. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I put the car in gear and drove toward my son's house, my jaw set so tight my teeth ached. I had spent 40 years as a union auditor. My job was to look at rows of numbers and find the lies hidden between them. I knew how to spot a discrepancy, and looking at my granddaughter, I knew I was looking at a discrepancy that no one else was seeing. We pulled up to the driveway of my son Tyson's house. It was a beautiful 2-story colonial in a nice suburb, the kind of house that screams success. Tyson worked himself to the bone as a software engineer to pay for it. I grabbed Zoe's backpack and we walked to the front door. Before I could even knock, I heard a voice from inside. It was bright, cheerful, and completely fake. I opened the door. In the kitchen, Rebecca was standing in front of a ring light and a tripod holding her phone. She was dressed in a pristine white apron over a designer dress, her makeup flawless. She held a blender filled with a murky green liquid. "And that is why we only use organic kale and filtered alkaline water for Zoe," she was saying to the camera, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It is a full-time job keeping my little warrior healthy, but a mother's love knows no bounds." Thank you for the stars, user, Jessica99. Every donation helps with her treatments. She saw us enter. She didn't stop filming. She just widened her smile. "Oh, look, everyone. Here is my brave girl now, home from school. Come say hi to your prayer warrior, Zoe." Zoe froze in the hallway. She looked at me, terrified. "Go on." I nudged her gently. Zoe walked into the kitchen frame, head down. Rebecca immediately wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. But I saw the grip. Her fingers dug into Zoe's thin shoulder with a force that turned her knuckles white. "Look how tired she is," Rebecca cooed to the phone. "The chronic fatigue is flaring up again. We might need another round of tests. Please keep the donations coming. We are saving up for a specialist in Switzerland." She blew a kiss to the camera and tapped the screen to end the live stream. The moment the light went off, the smile vanished from her face like it had been wiped off with a rag. She shoved Zoe away. "You are late," she snapped, turning her glare on me. "You ruined the lighting. I needed the afternoon sun for the sponsor segment." I looked at the green sludge in the blender. "Is that her dinner, Rebecca? She is starving. She needs protein. She needs real food." Rebecca laughed, a harsh barking sound. "What do you know about it, Solomon? You are a retired bean counter living in a one-bedroom apartment. I have read the research. Her gut is leaking. Solid food is toxic to her system right now." I stepped forward. "She has lost 5 pounds in a month. Look at her arms." Rebecca stepped between me and Zoe. "She is detoxing. It is part of the healing process. And you," she pointed a manicured finger at my chest, "you are confusing her. Tyson told me you tried to give her pizza last week. Are you trying to kill her?" "You are getting senile, Solomon. Maybe it is time you stopped these visits. You are a danger to her health." I looked at Tyson, who had just walked in from the garage, still wearing his badge from work. He looked exhausted, his eyes sunken. He saw the tension in the room and immediately shrank. "Dad, please," Tyson said, his voice weak. "Rebecca knows what she is doing. She has done the research. Just go home. We do not want to upset Zoe." I looked at my son. This strong, brilliant man I had raised had been reduced to a shadow in his own home. He was terrified of her. And looking at Zoe, cowering by the refrigerator, I realized she was terrified too. I did not argue. I knew better than to fight a war without ammunition. I nodded slowly. "All right. I will go. I just want what is best for her." I walked out the door, but not before I saw Rebecca pour that green water into a cup and force it into Zoe's hands. "Drink it all," she hissed. "Or no iPad tonight." I drove home in silence, the image of my granddaughter's skeletal frame burning in my mind. I sat in my small apartment surrounded by stacks of old financial records and books. The silence was deafening. I tried to watch TV, but I couldn't focus. My auditor's brain was screaming at me. The numbers didn't add up. A sick child doesn't get worse with care unless the care is the problem. I thought about the donations Rebecca mentioned. Switzerland, specialists. I knew Tyson made good money. Why did they need donations? And why was Zoe so afraid of food? I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor until 3 a.m. Then I remembered something from my days auditing insurance fraud cases. There was a case 20 years ago. A mother who poisoned her son with salt to simulate kidney failure. She did it for the attention, for the sympathy. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I needed proof. Rebecca was smart. She controlled the narrative. She had the medical records, or at least she claimed to. If I went to the police now, they would see a concerned white mother and a confused old black man. I would lose. I would be banned from seeing Zoe forever. I needed eyes inside that house. The next morning, I went to a spy shop downtown. I paid cash for a high-definition pinhole camera with a long life battery and remote Wi-Fi access. Then I went to the toy store and bought a large, fluffy teddy bear. I sat at my kitchen table with a seam ripper and a needle. My hands, usually steady with a pen, were shaking slightly. I carefully opened the seam along the bear's neck. I hollowed out a space behind the plastic eye and inserted the camera lens. I packed the battery pack deep into the stuffing and sewed it back up. It was invisible. That afternoon, I drove back to Tyson's house. I knew Rebecca would be out at her yoga class and Tyson would be working in his home office. It was my window. I rang the doorbell. Tyson answered, looking surprised. "Dad, I thought we said space." "I just wanted to drop this off," I said, holding up the bear. "For Zoe. An apology gift. For being pushy yesterday." Tyson sighed, taking the bear. "Thanks, Dad. Look, I know you care. But Rebecca is under a lot of stress." "I know, son. I know. Just make sure Zoe gets it. Tell her it is from Grandpa Solomon, to keep her safe at night." He nodded and closed the door. I walked back to my car, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sat in the driver's seat and opened my laptop. I connected to the secure app. The screen flickered to life. I saw the ceiling of Zoe's room. Then the angle shifted as someone placed the bear on a shelf. I saw Zoe's face close up, looking at the bear. She looked sad. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered to the empty room. I closed the laptop. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the darkness to reveal what the light was hiding. I had no idea that what I was about to see would shatter my heart into 1,000 pieces. I sat alone in my darkened apartment, the blue light of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the walls. The digital clock on the corner of the screen read 8:43 p.m. My heart was beating a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a rhythm of dread. On the screen, the hidden camera feed from the teddy bear was grainy but clear enough. It showed my granddaughter Zoe lying in her bed, hugging her knees to her chest. She looked so small, swallowed up by the oversized duvet. Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open. Rebecca walked in. She wasn't wearing her apron or her camera-ready smile now. She wore a silk robe and her face was hard set in lines of annoyance. She carried a large plastic cup filled with a thick, cloudy green liquid. It looked nothing like the healthy kale smoothies she paraded on Instagram. It looked viscous and chemical. "Sit up," Rebecca commanded. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence of the room. Zoe flinched and sat up slowly, trembling. "Mom, please," she whispered. "My stomach hurts so bad. I don't want any more." Rebecca didn't soften. She didn't offer a hug or a soothing word. Instead, she thrust the cup toward Zoe's face. "You know the drill, Zoe. Drink it. We need to flush your system." "But it makes me go to the bathroom all night," Zoe cried, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "It burns, Mommy. Please. Can I just have some toast? I am so hungry." "Toast." Rebecca let out a cruel, incredulous laugh. "Bread is poison, Zoe. Do you want to stay sick forever? Do you want everyone to forget about you? This medicine cleans you out. It makes you pure. Now drink." She forced the cup to Zoe's lips. My granddaughter gagged, trying to turn her head away, but Rebecca grabbed her jaw with one hand, forcing her mouth open. I watched in horror as she tipped the liquid down the throat of my 7-year-old granddaughter. Zoe sputtered and coughed green slime running down her chin, but she swallowed. She had no choice. When the cup was empty, Rebecca set it down on the nightstand with a thud. "There." Was that so hard? Zoe was sobbing quietly now, clutching her stomach. "Can I sleep now?" "Not yet," Rebecca said. She reached out and pulled the duvet off Zoe. "Stand up. Let me see your stomach." Zoe scrambled out of bed. She stood in her thin pajamas, shivering. She lifted her shirt. Her ribs were visible. Counting them would have been easy. Her stomach was concave, empty. "You are still bloating," Rebecca said, poking Zoe's stomach with a critical finger. "I can see a little pouch there. That is not going to work for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Zoe asked, her voice small. "The fundraising shoot," Rebecca snapped. "We have the photographer coming at 10. You need to look frail, Zoe. You need to look like a warrior fighting for her life, not a chubby little girl who sneaks snacks. If your stomach sticks out, people won't donate. If they don't donate, we lose the house. Do you want to be homeless?" "No, Mommy." Zoe wept. "Then stop whining." Rebecca stood up and loomed over her. "And if you tell your grandfather or your father about the medicine, I will make you drink double tomorrow." Zoe nodded, terrified. "I just want a cracker," she whispered almost to herself. That was it. That was the trigger. Rebecca's hand lashed out so fast the camera barely caught the blur. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud, a sharp crack that echoed through my laptop speakers. Zoe fell back onto the bed, clutching her cheek, silent screams racking her body. "Shut up!" Rebecca hissed, leaning down into her face. "You do not eat until I say you eat. You do not speak until I say you speak. Now get to sleep. You have a big day of looking dying tomorrow." She turned off the light and slammed the door. The screen went black, save for the infrared outline of my granddaughter curling into a ball, shaking with silent sobs. I sat there for exactly 3 seconds, frozen by a rage so pure and hot it felt like lava in my veins. Then I moved. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My fingers were shaking so badly I mistyped the first time. 911. "What is your emergency?" "My daughter-in-law is killing my granddaughter," I roared into the phone. "I need police at 42 Oak Creek Drive immediately. She is poisoning her. She is abusing her. Send everyone." "Sir, please calm down," the dispatcher said. "What is happening?" "There is no time to be calm," I shouted. I jumped up, grabbing my keys. I did not bother with a jacket. I ran out of my apartment building and threw myself into my Buick. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. I drove like a madman. I ran 2 red lights. I did not care. All I could see was that slap. All I could hear was that crack. All I could think about was that green poison burning a hole in my granddaughter's empty stomach. The drive usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 10. I screeched into Tyson's driveway, nearly hitting his SUV. I jumped out of the car and ran to the front door. I pounded on it with my fist, screaming, "Tyson, open this door. Open it now." There was no answer. I didn't wait. I stepped back and kicked the door right near the lock. I am 70 years old, but adrenaline is a powerful drug. The wood splintered. I kicked again harder. The door flew open, banging against the wall. I stormed into the hallway. Tyson appeared at the top of the stairs wearing his pajamas, looking sleepy and confused. He rubbed his eyes. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Did you break the door?" "Get out of my way, Tyson," I yelled, charging up the stairs. "Where is she? Where is that witch?" Rebecca appeared from the master bedroom. She was still wearing her silk robe. She took one look at my face, a face contorted with fury, and she didn't argue. She didn't fight. She did exactly what a predator does when cornered. She played the victim. She let out a theatrical gasp, put her hand to her forehead, and collapsed onto the floor in a dead faint. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Rebecca Tyson screamed, rushing to her side. "Dad, what did you do? You gave her a heart attack. She is faking it, Tyson," I shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her prone body. "I saw her. I saw what she did to Zoe. She slapped her. She is poisoning her with laxatives." Tyson looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and fear. "Dad, you are talking crazy. Laxatives slapping Rebecca loves Zoe. You are having an episode. You are not making sense." I tried to push past him to get to Zoe's room, but Tyson stood up and blocked me. He put his hands on my chest. "Dad, stop. You are scaring everyone. You need to calm down." "I am not scaring anyone except the monster on the floor," I spat. "Move, Tyson. I need to get Zoe out of here." Just then, sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the window, illuminating the chaotic scene. The police had arrived. Thank God, I thought. Now they will see. Now they will know. 2 officers came through the broken front door, guns drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted. I raised my hands. "Up here," I called out. "I called you. I am the grandfather." The officers came up the stairs cautiously. One was a tall, stern-looking man. The other was younger. They saw the broken door frame. They saw me chest-heaving, sweating. They saw Tyson kneeling over his wife, who was now stirring, fluttering her eyelids open with a low moan. "What is happening here?" the tall officer asked. "This man broke into our house," Tyson said, his voice trembling. "He is my father. He has been acting strange lately. I think he is having a breakdown." "No," I shouted. "I broke in because she is abusing my granddaughter. I have proof." Rebecca sat up slowly, leaning weakly against Tyson. She looked up at the officers with big tear-filled eyes. "Officers, please," she whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. "He is confused. My father-in-law, he has been struggling with dementia. He gets paranoid. He thinks everyone is trying to hurt our daughter." "That is a lie," I yelled. "Check her room. Check Zoe's room." One officer went to check on Zoe. The other stayed with us. Rebecca turned to Tyson. "Honey, get the binder, the medical binder. Show the officers." Tyson ran into the bedroom and came back with a thick white binder. He handed it to the tall officer. Officer Rebecca said, gaining strength, "My daughter Zoe has severe chronic intestinal pseudo-obstruction. Her gut doesn't work. She requires a very strict liquid diet and medication to help her pass waste. It is a terrible, painful disease. My father-in-law doesn't understand. He thinks we are starving her, but we are following doctor's orders. Here are the charts. Here are the diagnoses." The officer opened the binder. It was impressive. I could see pages and pages of charts, letterheads from specialist dietary logs. It looked official. It looked real. I stared at it dumbfounded. "Those are fake," I stammered. "They have to be." I saw her force-feeding the girl. The younger officer came out of Zoe's room. "The girl is asleep," he said. "She looks thin, but there are no signs of a struggle. She is in bed." "Of course she is thin," Rebecca sobbed, burying her face in Tyson's shoulder. "She is dying. We are doing everything we can to save her, and he breaks down our door and traumatizes us." The tall officer closed the binder. He looked at me. He looked at my frantic eyes, my sweating face, my clenched fists. Then he looked at Rebecca, the weeping, fragile mother in her silk robe, surrounded by medical documentation. He made his choice. "Sir," the officer said to me, his voice hard, "you broke down a door. You are trespassing. I live 5 miles away," I pleaded. "I have a camera. I can show you the footage. It is on my laptop at home." "Sir, that is enough," the officer cut me off. "We have a sick child here and a mother with documentation. You are clearly agitated. Now your son can press charges for breaking and entering, or you can leave right now and never come back here tonight." I looked at Tyson. Son, please. Look at the camera. Tyson looked away. Dad, just go. Please. You need help. Rebecca is right. You are losing your grip. I looked at Rebecca. She was watching me over Tyson's shoulder. For a split second, the tears stopped. She gave me a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. A small, cold smile touched her lips. If you come back here, the officer warned, stepping closer to me, his hand resting on his belt. I will arrest you. Do you understand? I looked at the closed door of Zoe's room. I had failed. The system I had trusted for 70 years had just failed me. They saw an angry black man and a white damsel in distress, and the verdict was delivered before I could even speak. I understand, I said, my voice hollow. I walked down the stairs past the splintered wood of the doorframe I had kicked in. I walked out into the cool night air. The flashing lights of the police car blinded me. I got into my Buick and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned gray. I had lost the battle. Rebecca had won this round with her fake binder and her crocodile tears. But she had made a mistake. She had let me leave. She thought she had discredited me. She thought I was just a confused old man who would go home and cry. She was wrong. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going home to get my laptop, and then I was going to war. The sun had barely risen when the pounding started on my apartment door. It was not a polite knock. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of a fist driven by anger. I had not slept. I was still sitting at my kitchen table, the laptop closed in front of me. The image of my granddaughter's terror burned into my retinas. I knew who was at the door. I knew this was the fallout. I opened the door and found my son standing there. Tyson looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles that stood out against his skin. But it was not sadness I saw in his face. It was a cold, trembling rage. He did not step inside. He stood in the hallway, filling the frame, vibrating with an energy I had never seen in him before. He did not say hello. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key. It was the spare key to his house, the one he had given me 5 years ago when Zoe was born, telling me I was always welcome. He threw it at me. The metal struck my chest with a dull thud and clattered onto the floorboards between us. "You are done," Tyson said. His voice was low, shaking. "You are done coming to my house. You are done seeing my daughter. Tyson." "Please," I said, my voice hoarse from the screaming of the night before. "You have to look at the footage. I have it right here. Just watch 5 minutes. Just see what she does when you are not there." He stepped forward, getting right in my face. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Stop it," he hissed. "Just stop. Do you know what you did last night? Do you have any idea?" Rebecca woke up screaming at 3 a.m. She was cramping. She was bleeding. "Dad." I froze. Bleeding. "She is pregnant," Tyson said, tears finally spilling over his eyelids. "We were going to tell you next week. She is 10 weeks along, and because of your little stunt, because you decided to play action hero and kick down our door. The doctor says she is at high risk of a miscarriage. She has been crying for 6 hours straight, terrified she is going to lose the baby because her father-in-law lost his mind." I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't know she was pregnant. But then a cold voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Is she? Or is this just another layer of the lie? Another shield she is using to protect herself?" Tyson saw my hesitation. He saw the doubt in my eyes. "You are sick," he spat. "You are actually standing there wondering if I am lying. That is how far gone you are. The police were right. You are paranoid. You are obsessed." "I am obsessed with keeping Zoe alive," I said firmly. "Look at her, Tyson. She is a skeleton." "She has a digestive disorder," Tyson screamed, his voice echoing in the hallway. "Why can't you accept that? Why do you want her to be abused so badly? Is it because you hate Rebecca? Is it because she is white? Is that what this is?" The accusation hit me harder than the key had. I had raised this boy to see people, not colors. I had raised him to judge character. And now he was using my own lessons against me to defend a woman who was slowly killing his child. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in him. He wasn't just defending his wife. He was defending his reality. If he believed me, he would have to admit that he had been sleeping next to a monster. He would have to admit that he had failed to protect his daughter. That is a weight no man wants to carry, so he chose the easier path. He chose to believe I was the villain. "Stay away from us," Tyson said, stepping back. "If I see your car on our street, I will call the cops. If you come to Zoe's school, I will file a restraining order. I mean it, Dad. You are dead to us." He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. I watched him get into his SUV and drive off. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty space where my son used to be. Then I looked down at the key on the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and closed the door. The silence in my apartment was heavy, suffocating. Most men in my position would have poured a drink. They would have drowned the pain in whiskey or vodka. But I have never been most men. I don't drink. Alcohol dulls the senses, and right now I needed my mind sharper than a razor blade. I walked into my bedroom. I pushed aside the rack of old flannel shirts and worn-out coats. I knelt on the floor and pulled up a loose section of the carpet in the corner of the closet. Beneath it was a floor safe bolted into the concrete foundation. I spun the dial, left, right, left. The tumblers clicked into place. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside there were no stacks of cash, no gold bars. Just a thick black leather binder and a stack of ledgers. I pulled them out and carried them to the kitchen table. Tyson and Rebecca thought I was a retired auditor living on a pension. They thought my Buick was old because I couldn't afford a new one. They thought I lived in this apartment because it was all I could pay for. They were wrong. I opened the binder. The first page was a deed to a commercial warehouse complex in downtown Atlanta, purchased in 1985 for a song now worth $4 million. The next page was a portfolio of stocks bought during the tech boom of the 90s, untouched, compounding interest for 30 years. I turned the pages. Rental properties in 3 states, municipal bonds, offshore holdings I had set up legally years ago to minimize tax liability. I wasn't just comfortable. I was wealthy. I was worth nearly $8 million. I had lived quietly because I grew up poor and I never felt the need to flash my money. I wanted Tyson to build his own character, not live off my checkbook. But now this wasn't money, it was ammunition. I ran my finger down the columns of numbers. Rebecca wanted a war. She wanted to use medical bills and fake diagnoses to drain resources. She wanted to use the legal system to shut me out. She had no idea who she was fighting. She was playing checkers with a man who had been playing 3-dimensional chess with the IRS for 40 years. I picked up my pen and wrote a figure on a notepad. $100,000. That was my initial war chest. I would burn through every cent I had if it meant saving Zoe. "You want to make me the villain?" I whispered to the empty room. "Fine, I will be the villain. I will be the nightmare you never saw coming." I closed the binder and put it back in the safe. Then I went to my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in 5 years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Miller," I said. "It is Solomon." There was a pause. "Solomon, the bean counter. I thought you were dead." "Not yet," I said. "I have a job for you. I am retired Solomon. You know that. They took my badge. I know why they took your badge, Miller. Because you broke a suspect's jaw when he wouldn't tell you where the missing girl was. That is exactly why I am calling you." Silence on the other end. Then the sound of a lighter flicking. "I am listening. I need you to dig. Deep. I need you to find a ghost. Her name is Rebecca, but I don't think that is her real name. She is a white woman, mid-30s, from the Midwest, or so she claims." "I need a retainer," Miller grunted. "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in an hour," I said. "Bring a big envelope." I hung up. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The eyes staring back at me were tired, red-rimmed, and old. But behind them, the fire was burning. Tyson had taken away my access. He had taken away my title as grandfather. But he had forgotten one thing. You do not back a man into a corner when he has nothing left to lose. I arrived at the diner 40 minutes later. It was a greasy spoon place, the kind where the coffee tastes like battery acid and the waitress calls everyone honey. Miller was sitting in a booth in the back nursing a black coffee. He looked like a boulder that had learned to wear a leather jacket. He was balding with a thick gray beard and eyes that had seen too much human misery. I slid into the booth opposite him. I didn't say a word. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick white envelope. I slid it across the sticky table. Miller picked it up. He didn't open it. He just waited in his hand. "There is $10,000 in there," I said. "Cash." Miller raised an eyebrow. "You robbing banks now, Solomon?" "That is just the down payment," I said, leaning forward. I need everything, Miller. I want to know where she was born. I want to know her maiden name. I want to know who she dated in college. I want to know her medical history. I want you to go through her trash. I want you to find the skeletons she thinks she buried. Miller tucked the envelope into his jacket. Who is she? My daughter-in-law, I said. She is killing my granddaughter. Miller's face didn't change, but his eyes hardened. He set his coffee cup down. Poison Munchausen by proxy, I said. She is starving her, drugging her, and she has the police and my son wrapped around her little finger. Miller nodded slowly. I had a case like that once. In '98. Mother was putting bleach in the kid's feeding tube. Nasty business. I need proof, Miller. Undeniable proof. She has fake medical records. She has a fake charity. She is running a con, and my granddaughter is the prop. Miller pulled a small notepad from his pocket. What do we have so far? I told him everything. The green liquid, the slap, the threats, the fake anxiety attack when the cops arrived, the story about the gut condition. Miller took notes in a shorthand that looked like scratches. When I finished, he looked up. This woman. He said, his voice low and gravelly. She sounds like a professional. You don't get that good at lying overnight. She has done this before. That is what I think too, I said. Find out where. Find out who. Miller stood up. He threw a $5 bill on the table for the coffee. Go home, Solomon. Stay off the radar. If she sees you, she will go underground or she will hurt the kid to spite you. Let me work. How long? I asked. Give me 48 hours, Miller said. If she has a past, I will find it. And Solomon, yeah, if I find out she is hurting that kid, really hurting her, am I working within the law or am I working for you? I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't hesitate. You are working for me. Miller nodded once, a grim smile touching his lips. Good. I hate paperwork. He walked out of the diner, disappearing into the city noise. I sat there for a moment watching the steam rise from my untouched coffee. I had just hired a disgraced ex-cop to stalk my son's wife. I had just declared war on my own family. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a text from Tyson. Do not try to call us. We are blocking your number. Goodbye, Dad. I stared at the screen. A single tear rolled down my cheek, hot and salty. Goodbye, son, I whispered. I put the phone away. I stood up and walked out into the daylight. The sadness was still there, heavy as a stone in my chest, but the fear was gone. I had a mission now. I had a soldier. And I had a war chest that Rebecca couldn't even imagine. She wanted to play the victim. She wanted to play God with my granddaughter's life. She was about to learn that the devil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes he wears a cardigan and drives a Buick, and he is coming for her. Miller sat behind his scarred metal desk in an office that smelled of stale tobacco and old paper. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much darkness. He did not say a word at first. He just slid a thick manila envelope across the desk. It stopped right at the edge, inches from my hands. Open it, Miller said, his voice like gravel. But brace yourself, Solomon. It is worse than we thought. My hands trembled as I undid the clasp. I pulled out a stack of documents. The first page was a photocopy of an old driver's license. The woman in the photo was younger. Her hair was blonde instead of brunette, but the eyes were the same, cold, calculating. But the name on the license wasn't Rebecca. It was Sarah Jenkins. Who is Sarah Jenkins? I asked, looking up at Miller. Miller leaned back in his chair, the springs groaning under his weight. Rebecca is Sarah Jenkins. She changed her name legally 6 years ago in Ohio. Right after the trial, I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. She was tried for the murder of her 3-year-old son, Liam, Miller said flatly. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. A son. Tyson never mentioned a son. Tyson does not know, Miller said. Nobody knows. She buried that life, literally. The boy died of cardiac arrest. The prosecution argued she had been poisoning him with high levels of sodium to simulate a rare kidney condition. She blogged about it. She started a charity for him. She loved the attention, Solomon. She loved the sympathy of being the grieving mother. I felt bile rise in my throat, and she was acquitted. Mistrial, Miller grunted. Evidence was mishandled by a rookie cop. The chain of custody was broken. Her lawyer got the toxicology report thrown out. She walked free. 2 months later, she changed her name, dyed her hair, and moved to this state. Then she met Tyson. I stared at the photo of the woman who slept next to my son. The woman who was currently mixing green sludge for my granddaughter. She was a predator. She had done this before. She had killed her own flesh and blood for likes and donations. She is doing it again, I whispered. She is doing the exact same thing to Zoe. Munchausen by proxy Miller confirmed. She makes the kids sick to feed her own ego and her bank account. But this time she is smarter. She is not using salt. She is using something harder to trace, and she has insulated herself better. I looked at the file again. There were newspaper clippings. A headline read, "Mom of Miracle Boy Maintains Innocence." In the photo, Sarah Jenkins was wiping a tear from her eye, looking devastated. It was the same performance I had seen in my son's hallway when the police arrived. "We have to tell the police," I said, reaching for the file, with what Miller asked. "A decade-old mistrial, a name change. That is not illegal." Solomon. "She will say she changed her name to escape the harassment of a wrongful accusation. She will play the victim again. She will say you are digging up her tragic past to hurt her. The cops will side with her. We need hard evidence of what she is doing right now. Today." I slammed my fist on the desk. "My granddaughter is living with a murderer." "Then let's catch her in the act," Miller said. "You wanted to know about the money. You wanted to know why she needs donations when Tyson makes 6 figures. I nodded, breathing hard. "Look at the second section of the file," Miller said. I turned the divider. It was a financial report. She started a nonprofit called Hope for Zoe. Miller explained, "It brings in about $50,000 a month. People from all over the country send checks. They think they are paying for experimental treatments in Switzerland." "And where does the money go?" I asked. "That is where you come in," Solomon, Miller said, pointing a thick finger at me. "You are the auditor. You follow the money. I can find the bodies, but you can find the cash. I got you the bank records for the charity. They were sloppy with their digital security." I looked at the stack of bank statements Miller had printed out. Rows and rows of numbers. My territory. I took the file. "I will find it," I said. "If she is stealing, I will find every cent." "Go home," Solomon, Miller said. "Do the math. I have to go tail our girl. She left the house an hour ago." "Where is she going?" "To meet her partner," Miller said. "Tyson is at work," I said. "Not Tyson." Miller shook his head, a dark look in his eyes. "She didn't do this alone in Ohio, and she isn't doing it alone now. You don't get fake medical records without a Dr. Solomon." I drove back to my hotel suite, my mind racing. I set up a workstation on the dining table. I spread out the bank statements Miller had given me. I opened my laptop and logged into my old auditing software. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I started with the Hope for Zoe operating account. The deposits were frequent and small. $20 from a grandmother in Iowa, $50 from a teacher in Texas. Heartbreaking notes attached to the transfers. "Praying for your little angel. God bless you, Mama Bear." Then I looked at the withdrawals. There were massive transfers going out every Friday. 5,000, 10,000. They were labeled medical consulting fees and specialized dietary supplements. I traced the recipient. It was a company called BioLife Solutions, LLC. I ran a search on BioLife Solutions. It was registered in Delaware, a state known for corporate anonymity. But I knew how to dig. I looked up the registered agent. It was a generic legal service. I dug deeper, looking for the tax ID number. I found it. BioLife Solutions had no employees. It had no office. It was a mailbox in a strip mall 3 towns over. It was a shell company, a fake entity designed to swallow money. But who owned it? I cross-referenced the tax ID with other businesses. Nothing. Then I looked at the routing number for the bank account where the money landed. It was a local bank. I hacked into my own memory of banking codes. I couldn't access the account holder's name legally, but I could look at the pattern. The money went into BioLife, sat for 24 hours, and then was withdrawn in cash or transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans. This wasn't just fraud, this was money laundering. Rebecca was taking charity money meant for a sick child and funneling it into a black hole. I kept digging. I looked at the other vendors, Global Health Partners, Vitality Corp. All of them were shell companies. All of them led back to the same P.O. box. And then I saw it. A recurring payment for consulting services to an individual. A Dr. A.V. I searched the medical board database. Dr. Anthony Vance, a pediatric gastroenterologist. His practice was on the other side of the city. He had a clean record on the surface, but when I looked closer at his financial footprint, things didn't add up. He had filed for bankruptcy 4 years ago. He lost his house. He had gambling debts. And now he was driving a Porsche and living in a penthouse downtown. I looked at the dates of the payments from Hope for Zoe to Dr. Vance. They started 2 months before Zoe got sick. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a payroll. Rebecca wasn't just fooling the doctors. She was paying one. She had a doctor on her payroll to validate her lies, to write the prescriptions, to sign the fake charts. I grabbed my phone to call Miller, but a text came through from him first. Bingo. Check your email. I opened my email. There were 3 photos attached. The first photo was grainy, taken with a telephoto lens. It showed the entrance of a flashy casino on the riverfront. Rebecca was walking in. She wasn't wearing her sad mom clothes. She was wearing a red dress, high heels, and sunglasses. She looked like a movie star. I clicked the second photo. It was inside the casino near the high-limit slots. Rebecca was standing next to a man. He was tall, with slicked-back gray hair and an expensive suit. He had his hand on the small of her back. It was intimate. Too intimate. I clicked the third photo. This was the money shot. Literally. Rebecca was handing the man a thick white envelope. It was bulging. The man was smiling, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Underneath his suit jacket, I could see the collar of a white shirt, and hanging from his pocket, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was a hospital ID badge. I zoomed in. The name on the badge was blurry but legible. Dr. A. Vance. I sat back the breath, leaving my lungs in a rush. It was him, the gambling doctor. He wasn't just her doctor, he was her lover, and he was her accomplice. I looked at the date stamp on the photo. It was taken an hour ago. While my granddaughter was starving in her bed, terrified and sick, her mother was at a casino handing a stack of stolen charity money to the man who was helping her poison her own child. The rage I felt was different this time. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of the night before. It was cold. It was precise. It was the anger of a judge passing a death sentence. I picked up my phone and dialed Miller. I saw the pictures, I said. Yeah, Miller replied. He is heading back to his clinic now. She is staying at the tables. She is playing blackjack with Zoe's college fund. Solomon Miller said, his voice dropping. This guy Vance. He is the one writing the scripts for the heavy stuff, the immunosuppressants, the laxatives. I know, I said. I found the money trail. He is on her payroll. We need those files, Solomon. We need the real medical records, the ones he keeps in his private safe, not the fake ones they showed the cops. Can you get them, I asked. Not legally, Miller said. We would need a warrant, and we don't have enough for a judge yet. I don't care about legal, I said. I care about Zoe. There was a pause on the line. Then I heard the click of a lighter. If we do this, Solomon, there is no going back. If we get caught, we go to prison. Breaking and entering into a medical facility is a felony. I am 70 years old, Miller. I have lived a good life. If I have to spend my last years in a cell to save that little girl, so be it. Meet me at his clinic at midnight, Miller said. Wear black, and bring your gloves. I hung up. I looked at the photos one last time. Rebecca laughing, the doctor smiling, the envelope of cash. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were smarter than everyone else. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten to account for the grandfather. I closed my laptop. I went to the closet and pulled out a dark sweater and a pair of leather gloves. I checked my watch. 5 hours until midnight. 5 hours until I became a criminal. I sat by the window and watched the sun go down over the city. I thought about Zoe. I thought about the teddy bear watching over her. Hang on, sweet pea, I whispered to the glass. Grandpa is coming, and I am bringing the storm with me. The playground fence was chain link 8 feet high and cold against my fingers. I stood in the shadow of an old oak tree, my collar turned up against the wind, watching the children run. They were loud, vibrant, full of that restless energy that defines childhood. But I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for the one child who wasn't running. I found her sitting alone on a wooden bench near the hopscotch grid. Zoe looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her school uniform, a plaid skirt and navy sweater, hung off her frame like clothes on a wire hanger. Her head was bowed, her chin resting on her chest as if holding it up was too much effort. She wasn't playing. She was barely existing. I checked my watch. Recess had 10 minutes left. I knew the security guard, an older man named Earl, took his coffee break right now. I had timed it yesterday. I wasn't supposed to be here. Tyson had made it clear. The school had my name on a list. But laws and lists don't matter when your flesh and blood is fading away before your eyes. I slipped through the gap in the maintenance gate I had unlocked earlier with a simple shim. I moved quickly, keeping my head down, blending into the background like I had learned to do over 70 years of being invisible when I needed to be. I approached the bench from behind. "Zoe," I whispered. She jumped, her thin shoulders spasming. She turned around and the look in her eyes broke my heart all over again. It wasn't just fear, it was exhaustion. Her eyes were sunken dark circles bruised into the delicate skin beneath them. Her lips were cracked and dry. "Grandpa," she breathed, her voice a tiny, scratchy sound. "You aren't supposed to be here. Mommy said the police will take you to jail. Let them come," I said, sitting down next to her, shielding her body with my own coat. "I brought you something." I reached into my deep coat pocket and pulled out the package I had kept warm against my side. It wasn't fancy. It was a cheeseburger from the diner down the street, wrapped in foil, still hot. I peeled back the silver paper. The smell of grilled beef, melted cheese, and toasted bun wafted up rich and savory. Zoe's eyes widened. Her nostrils flared. I saw her throat work as she swallowed dryly. "Eat," I said gently. "Fast." She looked at the burger, then at me, then back at the burger. "But Mommy says," she started, her voice trembling. "She says gluten will make my insides explode. She says meat is rotting in my colon. She is lying, Zoe." I said, my voice firm but low. "It is food. It is fuel. Look at me. I have eaten these my whole life. Am I exploding?" She hesitated for one more second, the indoctrination warring with the primal instinct of hunger. Then hunger won. She grabbed the burger with both hands. She didn't take a bite. She attacked it. She tore into the meat and bread with a ferocity that was terrifying to watch. Grease ran down her chin and she didn't wipe it. She chewed and swallowed, making small animal noises in her throat. I watched her, keeping one eye on the school doors. "Slow down, sweet pea," I whispered, stroking her hair. It was dry and brittle like straw. "Chew it." She finished half the burger in 30 seconds. Then she stopped panting, clutching the remaining half to her chest. She looked up at me and her eyes were filled with tears. "It tastes so good, Grandpa," she sobbed quietly. "It tastes like real food." "It is real food," I said. "And you are going to get better, I promise." I heard the door to the school building slam open. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I felt the shift in the air, the sudden drop in temperature that happened whenever she entered a room. "There he is." The voice was shrill, piercing the playground noise. "Get him away from her." I turned. Rebecca was marching across the asphalt, her heels clicking like gunshots. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by the school principal, a nervous-looking woman in a gray suit, and the school security officer who had clearly missed his coffee break. But what chilled me the most was what Rebecca was holding. Her phone was held high, the ring light attachment glowing even in the daylight. She was live streaming. I turned back to Zoe. "Finish it," I commanded. "Eat the rest. Now." Zoe tried to take another bite, but the fear paralyzed her. Rebecca was upon us in seconds. "Get away from my daughter," Rebecca shrieked, aiming the camera lens right at my face. "Look, everyone, look at this. I told you he was dangerous." She lunged forward, not to grab Zoe, but to slap the burger out of her hands. The food flew onto the dirty asphalt. Zoe cried out as if she had been struck. "Gluten!" Rebecca screamed at the phone, her face contorted in a mask of terrified motherly concern. "He is feeding her gluten and red meat. He is trying to kill her. Her system can't handle this. She is going to go into anaphylactic shock." She grabbed Zoe by the arm and yanked her off the bench so hard I heard the girl's shoulder pop. Zoe screamed a high-pitched wail of pain and terror. "Mommy, no. It was good. I was hungry. You are hallucinating from the toxins," Rebecca yelled over her, playing to the digital audience. "Oh my God, look at her. She is delirious. Someone call 911. My father-in-law has poisoned my child." The principal stepped forward, looking terrified. "Mr. Solomon, you need to leave. You are trespassing. We have a court order on file from your son." I stood up, towering over Rebecca. I didn't look at the phone. I looked right into her cold blue eyes. "You are the poison, Rebecca," I said, my voice booming across the playground. You are starving this child. Look at her. She is eating a burger off the ground because she is dying of hunger." Rebecca turned the camera to the burger on the ground, then back to me. "He is delusional," she sobbed to her followers. "He has dementia. He thinks he is helping, but he is murdering her. Look at my poor baby. She is so pale. The gluten is already shutting down her organs." I saw the comments flying up the screen of her phone. "Monster. Arrest him. Protect that mother. Call the police." The security guard grabbed my arm. "Sir, you need to come with me. Now, or I will put you in cuffs." I looked at Zoe. She was on her knees reaching for the smashed burger, crying hysterically while her mother narrated her suffering for likes. I knew this was it. I knew I wouldn't see her again for a long time. I had lost the battle for the narrative, but I still had a war to win. I needed proof. I needed something undeniable, something a lab could analyze, something that didn't lie like Rebecca did. I looked at Zoe's head bowed in misery, her hair. I jerked my arm free from the guard's grip. "Hey!" he shouted, reaching for his taser. I didn't run away. I lunged toward Zoe. Rebecca screamed, thinking I was attacking her. "He is attacking us. Help." I ignored her. I grabbed a handful of Zoe's brittle, dry hair near the back of her head. I didn't have scissors. I didn't have time to be gentle. I yanked. Zoe yelped a sharp cry of pain. I felt the strand snap and pull free from her scalp. It was a cruel thing to do. It made me sick to my stomach to hurt her even a little. But I needed the follicle. I needed the root. That is where the secrets were hidden. "Got you," the guard shouted, tackling me from behind. I went down hard on the asphalt, my knees scraping raw. The guard pinned my arms behind my back, pressing my face into the gravel. I clenched my right fist tight, protecting the ball of hair I had stolen. "You are sick," Rebecca screamed, standing over me, filming my humiliation. "You pulled her hair out. You violent old lunatic. Everyone see this. He attacked a sick child. I didn't fight the guard. I let him handcuff me. I let him drag me up. I kept my fist closed. I accepted the pain in my shoulder. I accepted the spit flying from Rebecca's mouth. I accepted the horrified looks of the teachers and the children who had gathered to watch the show. I looked at Zoe one last time. She was being held by the principal now, sobbing, clutching her head where I had pulled the hair. She looked at me with betrayal in her eyes. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. "I am sorry, Zoe," I whispered, though she couldn't hear me over the siren of the approaching police car. "I am so sorry." As they marched me toward the parking lot, Rebecca was still filming, narrating her victory, but I wasn't listening to her lies anymore. I was feeling the hair in my palm. It was dry. It was thin. But to me, it felt like gold. It felt like a weapon. They could arrest me. They could shame me. They could ban me from the school. But they couldn't take this from me. I had the sample. And once I got out of that cell, I was going straight to the lab. Rebecca thought she had won a scene in her reality show. She didn't realize she had just handed me the evidence that would send her to prison for the rest of her life. I climbed into the back of the police car, and for the first time that day I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile, the kind a wolf gives before it bites. The envelope from the private toxicology lab sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. It was a simple white business envelope, innocuously thin, but I knew it contained the power to destroy lives. My hands, usually steady as a rock, trembled slightly as I picked up the letter opener. I had paid $3,000 for an expedited analysis of the hair follicle I had pulled from my granddaughter's head. I needed to know what was in her blood. I needed to know what was turning a vibrant 7-year-old girl into a ghost. I sliced the envelope open. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. My eyes scanned past the technical jargon, the mass spectrometry graphs, and settled on the summary section at the bottom. Positive. The word hit me like a physical blow. But it wasn't just positive for laxatives, which I had expected. It was positive for something far worse. Mercaptopurine. I stared at the word. I didn't know what it was. I grabbed my laptop and typed it into the search bar. The results filled the screen and my blood turned to ice. Mercaptopurine is a chemotherapy drug. It is used to treat leukemia. It suppresses the immune system. It causes nausea, vomiting, hair loss, and extreme fatigue. Zoe didn't have leukemia. I knew that. The fake binder Rebecca showed the police listed a gut disorder, not cancer. So why was a chemotherapy drug in my granddaughter's system? Then I understood. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Rebecca wasn't just making Zoe sick with laxatives to fake a stomach issue. She was chemically poisoning her to mimic the symptoms of a terminal illness. The hair loss, the gray skin, the weakness. It was all a side effect of a drug. Zoe didn't need a drug that was slowly shutting down her body's natural defenses. If she caught a cold, she could die. If she got an infection, she could die. I looked at the levels. They were high, dangerously high. Rebecca was dosing her heavy. She was pushing her to the brink of death, just close enough to terrify the donors, just close enough to keep the money flowing, but not quite over the edge. Yet, I slammed the laptop shut. A roar of pure primal rage built in my throat. This wasn't just abuse, this was torture. It was attempted murder in slow motion. My son was sleeping next to a woman who was methodically executing his daughter with cancer drugs. I grabbed my phone. I had to call Miller. We had the smoking gun. This piece of paper was the end of Rebecca. It was the key to a prison cell. I dialed his number, my thumb hitting the screen with force. "Answer, Miller," I hissed. "Pick up." But before the call could connect, my doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent ring. Not the heavy pounding of Tyson, but the professional, detached chime of a stranger. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Miller would have texted. Tyson was blocking me. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a cheap suit stood there holding a tablet and a thick envelope. He looked bored. I opened the door, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you, Solomon King?" the man asked, looking at his tablet. "That is me." "You have been served," he said. He shoved the envelope through the crack in the door. It hit my chest and fell to the floor. Before I could say a word, he turned and walked away, tapping on his screen. I closed the door and undid the chain. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, thick legal paper. The return address was a law firm I recognized. Goldman and Weiss. High-end family law. Sharks. I opened it. The first page was a court summons. But it wasn't a restraining order from Tyson. It was something much, much worse. Petition for emergency guardianship. I read the words, but my brain refused to process them. Guardianship. That was for people who couldn't take care of themselves. That was for the senile, the incapacitated. I flipped to the affidavit. It was signed by Rebecca King. I, Rebecca King, hereby state that my father-in-law, Solomon King, is suffering from advanced dementia and paranoid delusions. He has become violent and unpredictable. On the night of October 24th, he broke down the door of my home, assaulted my husband, and threatened my sick daughter. He believes in conspiracies and claims I am poisoning my child. He is a danger to himself and others. We request immediate temporary guardianship to ensure he receives the medical facility care he desperately needs. I staggered back, leaning against the wall for support. They weren't just trying to keep me away from Zoe. They were trying to lock me up. They used my outburst. They used the kicked-in door. They used my accusations against me. They had twisted the truth so effectively that a judge had already signed a temporary order. Hearing set for Friday, October 27th at 9 a.m. That was in 48 hours. I flipped to the next page. It was a request for control of assets. Due to Mr. King's inability to manage his finances, the petitioner requests control over all bank accounts, real estate holdings, and investments to pay for his necessary institutional care. My knees gave out. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. They knew. Or maybe they didn't know the exact number, but they knew enough. They knew I had money, and this was the endgame. It wasn't just about silencing me. It was a hostile takeover. If the judge ruled I was incompetent, Rebecca became my guardian. She would have legal authority over me. She could force me into a nursing home. She could medicate me into a stupor. And she would get the keys to the kingdom. My warehouse in Atlanta, my stocks, my offshore accounts. She would take the millions I had saved for Zoe's future and use them to pay for her gambling, her designer clothes, and the poison she was feeding my granddaughter. It was brilliant. It was evil, but it was brilliant. One move. Checkmate. She gets rid of the only witness to her crimes and she gets rich in the process. A 2-for-1 deal. Kill the daughter for charity cash, lock up the grandfather for the inheritance. I looked at the toxicology report on the table. Then I looked at the court summons in my hand. I was holding the truth, but they were holding the law. If I went to the police now with the toxicology report, Rebecca would say, "I forged it." She would say it was part of my delusion. Her lawyer would argue that a senile man can't be trusted with evidence. She would use the guardianship petition to discredit everything I said. I was trapped. I sat on the floor of my hallway, the cold wood pressing against my legs. I felt a moment of pure, crushing despair. I was 70 years old. I was fighting a young, photogenic mother who had the sympathy of the world. I was fighting a legal system that looked at an old black man yelling about conspiracies and saw a dementia patient. I closed my eyes. I could see Zoe's face. I could see the terror in her eyes as she ate that burger. I could see the hair pulling out in my hand. If I lost this hearing, Zoe died. It was that simple. Rebecca would finish the job. She would cash out my accounts, let Zoe fade away, and play the grieving mother all the way to the bank. Number 1. I opened my eyes. I stood up. My joints popped, but my resolve hardened into steel. They wanted to play the legal game. Fine. They forgot who I was. I wasn't just a grandfather. I was an auditor. I spent 40 years tearing apart the lies of corporations and corrupt unions. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to destroy a narrative. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used yet. Steinberg, I said when the voice answered. Solomon Steinberg asked, surprised. It has been a decade. You finally ready to update that trust? No, I said. I need you to represent me. For what emergency guardianship hearing in 48 hours? Shit. My daughter-in-law is trying to put me in a home and steal $8 million. Steinberg whistled low. That is a bold move. Do they have a case? They have a kicked-in door and a lie, I said. But I have a toxicology report that says she is poisoning her daughter with chemo drugs. And I have a private investigator digging up her dead son in Ohio. Dead son, Steinberg's voice sharpened. Solomon, are you? I am not crazy, Steinberg. I cut him off. I am the sanest man you will ever meet, and I am going to burn her world to the ground. But I need you to keep me out of that nursing home long enough to do it. Be in my office in 20 minutes, Steinberg said. Bring the papers. Bring everything. I hung up. I grabbed the toxicology report, I grabbed the summons, I grabbed the hair sample. I looked at the empty apartment. This was my bunker. But the war had moved to the courtroom. Rebecca thought she had me cornered. She thought she had checkmated the old man. She didn't know I still had my queen. And I was about to flip the board. The waiting room of Dr. Aris looked less like a medical facility and more like the lobby of a high-end law firm. Leather chairs, abstract art on the walls, and a silence so thick you could choke on it. I sat next to my lawyer Steinberg. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the fabric of my old, comfortable cardigan. To anyone passing by, I looked like a confused, defeated old man. That was exactly the point. Steinberg leaned in close. His voice was barely a whisper. Remember the plan, Solomon. Do not fight him. If you argue, you look defensive. If you deny it, you look paranoid. Give him what he wants. I nodded slowly, letting my mouth hang open just a fraction. I knew the game. I had spent 40 years auditing companies where executives tried to hide embezzlement behind complicated spreadsheets. I knew that when someone wants to find a lie, the best way to catch them is to feed them a bigger lie until they choke on it. The heavy oak door opened. Dr. Aris stepped out. He was a small man with expensive glasses and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Mr. King, he said, please come in. I stood up, moving stiffly. I shuffled my feet. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the doorframe. I saw Tyson and Rebecca sitting on the other side of the waiting room. Tyson looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Rebecca watched me with the intense predatory focus of a hawk circling a field mouse. I walked into the office. Dr. Aris sat behind a massive desk. He didn't offer me water. He opened a file folder. It was empty. He didn't need notes. He already knew what his diagnosis was going to be. Rebecca had paid for it. So Mr. King, Dr. Aris, began clicking his pen. Your family tells me you have been having episodes. They say you believe people are trying to poison your granddaughter. I stared at the painting behind his head. It was a red circle on a white background. The rabbits don't like the poison, I said, my voice soft and airy. Dr. Aris paused. He blinked. Rabbits, blue rabbits. I continued, widening my eyes. They live in the radiators. They tell me things. They told me the green water is bad. They told me the teddy bear sees everything. Dr. Eris scribbled furiously on his pad. He was trying to hide his excitement, but I could see it. I was making his job so easy. He didn't have to fabricate symptoms. I was handing them to him on a silver platter. And these rabbits, Dr. Eris asked, leaning forward. Do they tell you to do things? Do they tell you to be violent? Only when the signals get too loud, I said, tapping the side of my head. The microwave. It sends signals to my teeth. That is why I kicked the door. The microwave told me the signals were coming from Rebecca. She is the queen of the static. Dr. Eris stopped writing. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional satisfaction. He wasn't looking at a human being. He was looking at a paycheck. He was looking at the easiest competency hearing of his career. Do you know what year it is, Mr. King? He asked. It is the year of the carrot, I whispered, looking around the room as if I expected spies to jump out of the curtains. That was it. That was the nail in the coffin. Dr. Eris closed the folder. He didn't ask about my career. He didn't ask about my finances. He didn't ask about the toxicology report I had in my pocket. He had heard enough to sign the paper that would strip me of my rights. Thank you, Mr. King, he said, standing up. You can go back to the waiting room. I stood up, keeping my shoulders hunched. I shuffled back to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. Doctor, I said, watch out for the blue ones. They bite. He just nodded, dismissing me. I walked out. Back in the waiting room, I sat down heavily next to Steinberg. I didn't look at him, but I felt him tense up. He knew what I had done. He knew I had just walked into a trap on purpose. Dr. Eris followed me out a moment later. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to Rebecca and Tyson. I watched them from under my lowered eyelids. I saw Dr. Eris speak in low, serious tones. I saw Tyson put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He was grieving. He thought his father was gone. He thought the man who raised him had lost his mind. But Rebecca didn't grieve. She nodded solemnly, touching the corner of her eye as if wiping away a tear, but her posture straightened. She grew 2 inches taller. It was the posture of a woman who had just won the lottery. Dr. Eris turned and walked back into his office. Tyson remained seated, his face buried in his palms. Rebecca stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked at me. She walked across the room. Her heels clicked on the tile floor. Click, 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 the sound of a gavel coming down. She stopped in front of me. Steinberg started to stand up to intervene, but I put a hand on his arm to stop him. I needed this. I needed her to feel safe. Rebecca leaned down. She brought her face close to mine. To anyone watching, it looked like a loving daughter-in-law saying a tender goodbye to a sick old man. She smelled of expensive perfume and triumph. You poor old thing, she whispered, her voice like silk. The doctor says you are completely gone. Advanced dementia with psychotic features. That is the official diagnosis. I stared at her chin, keeping my mouth slightly open, drooling a little. I rocked back and forth. Do you know what that means, Solomon? She continued, her voice dropping lower for my ears only. It means I win. The judge is going to sign the order tomorrow. I will be your guardian. I will be in charge of everything. She reached out and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. I know about the warehouse in Atlanta, she hissed. I know about the offshore accounts. I found the binder in your safe while you were playing detective. Did you think you could hide $8 million from me? I am going to take it all. I am going to sell your buildings. I am going to cash out your stocks. And I am going to use your money to buy the best lawyers money can buy when this blows over. I kept rocking. I mumbled something about carrots. And Zoe. Rebecca smiled, a cruel, thin curving of her lips. Zoe is going to be just fine. She is going to be my little sick miracle for a few more years. The donations will keep coming. And you are going to a state facility in the middle of nowhere, a place where they sedate you and forget you. You will rot there, Solomon. You will die alone in a room that smells like urine, and no one will ever believe a word you say, because you are the crazy old man who talks about rabbits. She stood up. She looked down at me with pure disgust. Goodbye, Dad, she said loud enough for Tyson to hear. We will take good care of you. She turned and walked back to Tyson. She put a hand on his shoulder, guiding him toward the exit. They left the office. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind them. The silence returned to the waiting room. Steinberg looked at me. He looked terrified. "Solomon," he said, "Dr. Eris is going to testify that you are insane. Rebecca knows about the money. If the judge believes them tomorrow, you are finished." This was a dangerous gamble. I stopped rocking. I closed my mouth. I sat up straight. The confusion vanished from my eyes, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who had balanced books for 40 years. I reached into the breast pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out a cheap plastic ballpoint pen. It looked like something you would pick up at a bank counter. I held it up to the light. I pressed the small clip on the side. A tiny red light, invisible, unless you were looking for it, blinked once and went out. "Did you get it?" Steinberg asked. I got everything I said, my voice steady and strong. I got the blue rabbits, I got the microwave signals, and I got her confessing that she found my safe, that she knows the exact value of my assets, and that she plans to use my money to fund her fraud. She admitted it wasn't about my health. She admitted it was a hostile takeover. Steinberg let out a long breath. That is admissible. In a competency hearing that proves malice, it proves a conflict of interest. She can't be your guardian if she just admitted she wants to rob you. It proves more than that, I said, pocketing the pen. It proves she is sane. A crazy person doesn't plot financial crimes with that much detail. She knows exactly what she is doing. I stood up. My knees didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. "Let's go, Steinberg," I said. "We have a lot of work to do." She thinks she won the war because she won the battle. She thinks I am a senile old man who is going to rot in a state home. I walked toward the door. "Tomorrow," I said, "I am going to introduce her to the man she really messed with. She wanted the money. She is going to get the full weight of it." I walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. Rebecca had made her move. She had overplayed her hand. She thought she was looking at a victim. She didn't realize she was looking at the bait, and now the trap was ready to snap shut. Steinberg is a wizard. He walked into that courtroom like he owned the building and filed a motion to delay the competency hearing based on a conflict of interest he dug up regarding Dr. Eris. Apparently, Eris had been investigated before for signing favorable evaluations for wealthy clients. It wasn't enough to get the case thrown out, but it was enough to spook the judge into granting a 48-hour continuance. That was all I needed. I had 2 days of freedom before they tried to lock me away in a state facility. Most men my age would use that time to say their goodbyes or hide their assets. I used it to buy a crowbar. Miller picked me up at the hotel service entrance at 2 in the morning. He was driving a nondescript sedan that smelled of old coffee and gun oil. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. "You know what happens if we get caught, Solomon. You are already on the hook for trespassing and harassment. If they catch you breaking and entering into a medical facility, you will die in prison. There won't be a trial. They will just throw away the key." I buckled my seatbelt. "I am 70 years old, Miller. I am already dying. We all are. The only question is whether I die as a convict or as a grandfather who saved his bloodline. Drive the car." Dr. Vance's clinic was located in an upscale medical park on the north side of the city. It was a sleek modern building of glass and steel surrounded by manicured hedges. At night, it looked like a spaceship that had landed in a garden. We parked a block away in the shadows of a construction site. We moved on foot, sticking to the darkness. I felt a strange sense of calm. My knees didn't ache. My breath came easy. It was as if my body knew that this was the final sprint. We reached the back door. It was a heavy steel fire door locked tight. Miller didn't use the crowbar. He pulled out a small electronic device that looked like a garage door opener. He placed it against the keypad. Numbers flashed rapidly on the small screen. 10 seconds later, the lock clicked with a heavy thud. "We are in," Miller whispered. No alarms. I disabled the silent signal from the junction box outside. We have 20 minutes before the system does a handshake with the security company and realizes it is offline. We slipped inside. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and lemon floor cleaner. It was the smell of sickness disguised as health. We moved quickly past the exam rooms, heading for the corner office, the one with the mahogany door and the nameplate that read Dr. Anthony Vance, Director. The door was locked. I used the crowbar this time. One sharp, leverage-heavy push, and the wood splintered around the latch. We were inside. The office was disgusting, not because it was dirty, but because it was opulent. Persian rugs, leather chairs that cost more than my car. A wet bar stocked with top-shelf liquor. This was where the charity money went. This was what Zoe's starvation paid for. "Start with the filing cabinets," I whispered to Miller. "I will take the desk." I sat in Vance's chair. It felt wrong, like sitting on a throne made of bones. I opened the drawers. Pens, prescription pads, golf balls, nothing. I tried the bottom drawer. Locked. I jammed the crowbar into the gap and leaned my weight on it. Metal screeched against metal. The lock popped. Inside, there were no hanging files. There was just a small black notebook and a stack of loose papers. I pulled them out. I turned on my pen light, keeping the beam focused and low. I began to read. And as I read, the rage inside me turned into a cold, hard stone. It wasn't just medical records. It was a script. Subject Z, 1 page read. Current weight, 42 pounds. Target weight for October Gala, 38 pounds. Increased dosage of mercaptopurine to 75 milligrams daily, starting Tuesday. Add diuretic to water supply to accelerate dehydration. Patient needs to look critical for the donor walk. I felt bile rise in my throat. They were engineering her decline. They had a target weight. They were dehydrating her on purpose so her skin would look papery and her eyes would sink in. It wasn't just abuse. It was torture by design. I flipped the page. There was a handwritten note in the margin in a loopy script I recognized as Rebecca's. "Make sure she vomits on stage if possible. It pulls the heartstrings. Can we give her something to induce it right before the speech?" And underneath, in Vance's jagged scrawl, "Ipecac syrup, 10 milliliters, will administer backstage." I had to put the notebook down. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold it. They were planning to force-feed my granddaughter Ipecac so she would throw up in front of hundreds of people just to squeeze a few more dollars out of the rich donors. They were monsters. There was no other word for it. "Got something," Miller whispered from the other side of the room. He was standing by a wall safe that was hidden behind a painting of a sailboat. It was open. Vance, in his arrogance, hadn't even engaged the tumblers fully. Miller pulled out a stack of ledgers and an external hard drive. "This is the jackpot, Solomon. This is the offshore ledger. Every dollar from the charity, every payout to Rebecca, every kickback to himself. It is all here. And this drive, this is his backup. If he is smart, he keeps digital copies of everything for insurance. We have them," I said, my voice trembling. "We have everything." Suddenly, a beam of light swept across the frosted glass of the office window. Security, Miller hissed. We heard the heavy thud of boots in the hallway, the jingle of keys. It wasn't the police. It was private security patrol. They must have seen the light or noticed the back door sensor was dead. "Hide," Miller commanded. There was nowhere to go. The desk was open underneath. The curtains were sheer. The only place was a tall metal supply cabinet in the corner. Miller grabbed my arm and shoved me toward it. We squeezed inside. It was tight, and it was occupied. I found myself pressed against a cold, hard plastic skeleton, an anatomical model used for demonstrating bone fractures. Its skull rattled against my ear. Miller squeezed in next to me, his bulk compressing me against the metal wall. He pulled the door shut just as the office door swung open. I held my breath. The space was claustrophobic. It smelled of dust and old latex. The plastic ribs of the skeleton dug into my side. I could hear the security guards breathing. It was heavy labored. He walked into the room. The beam of his flashlight cut through the cracks in the cabinet's vents. It slashed across my face, then Miller's. I closed my eyes, praying he wouldn't see the glint of the whites. "Who is there?" the guard shouted. "I saw the lights. Come out." He walked around the desk. He saw the splintered drawer. "Shit," he muttered. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we have a break-in at Suite 400. Send backup." He started sweeping the room with his light. The beam hit the cabinet door. I stopped breathing. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. It sounded like a drum in the tiny metal box. Thump, thump, thump. The guard took a step toward the cabinet. He reached for the handle. I tensed every muscle. If he opened it, we would have to fight. I was 70. Miller was 65. This guard sounded young and big. We didn't stand a chance. Then a noise came from the hallway. A loud crash, like a metal tray hitting the floor. The guard spun around. "What the hell?" He ran out of the office, his heavy boots pounding on the tile. Miller let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "That was the wind," he whispered. "Or God. Or maybe I just got lucky and knocked over a trash can on the way in. Let's move. Now." We burst out of the cabinet. I grabbed the notebook. Miller grabbed the hard drive. We didn't bother being quiet. We ran. We sprinted down the hallway away from the noise the guard was investigating. We burst out the back door into the cool night air. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but we didn't stop. We ran across the parking lot, vaulting a low hedge, and scrambled into the construction site. We huddled behind a stack of plywood as a patrol car screeched into the medical park entrance, lights flashing. We watched them run into the building. We made it. Miller wheezed, clutching his chest. We actually made it. I looked down at the hard drive in my hand. It was small, black, unassuming, but it contained the weight of the world. It contained Zoe's freedom. I looked at Miller. He was grinning, a wild, reckless grin that took 20 years off his face. "You did good, old man," he said, slapping my shoulder. "You did real good." I looked back at the clinic. I thought about the note. "Make sure she vomits." "It is enough," I said, my voice hard as iron. "No more hiding. No more running. Tomorrow is the gala. Tomorrow she stands on that stage and lies to the world one last time." And then Miller asked. "And then I burn her down," I said. "Tomorrow is her doomsday." We walked back to the car. The city lights twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the dark. But I wasn't indifferent. I felt a surge of power I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was the auditor. And the books were about to be balanced. Permanently. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a cathedral of glass and gold. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, like frozen explosions of light, casting a warm, expensive glow over the 300 guests who had gathered to celebrate their own generosity. The air smelled of white lilies and money. It was the kind of event where a single plate of food cost more than a month of groceries for a normal family, and where the wine flowed like water from a tap made of diamonds. At the center of it all stood Rebecca. She was radiant. She wore a floor-length gown of shimmering gold sequins that hugged her body like a second skin. Her hair was styled in elaborate waves, and diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears. To the casual observer, she looked like an angel, a saint walking among mortals. She moved through this crowd with a grace that was practiced and perfect, touching arms, laughing softly, accepting compliments with a humble bow of her head. But the centerpiece of the evening was not the woman in the gold dress. It was the small wheelchair parked next to the podium. Zoe sat there slumped to one side, looking like a broken doll that had been discarded in a corner. They had dressed her in a pale blue dress that washed out her complexion, making her look even more ghostly. Her head rolled slightly on her neck, her eyes half closed, unfocused and glassy. I knew why. The ledger I had stolen the night before detailed the dosage. A mild sedative mixed with the diuretic, just enough to keep her docile, just enough to keep her from crying out or asking for food, just enough to make her look like she was fading away right before their eyes. Rebecca had hired a professional makeup artist, I was sure of it. Dark circles had been accentuated under Zoe's eyes. Her cheeks were contoured to look more hollow. She was a prop, a stage decoration designed to elicit maximum pity and maximum cash. Tyson stood behind the wheelchair, his hand resting protectively on the handle. My son looked terrible. His tuxedo hung loosely on him as if he had lost 20 pounds in the last week. His eyes were shadowed, moving restlessly over the crowd. He looked like a man who was drowning but was too polite to scream for help. He believed the lie. He believed his daughter was dying of a mysterious illness. He believed his wife was a hero fighting a losing battle. And he believed his father was a lunatic who had tried to destroy his family. I watched from the shadows of the foyer, my heart breaking for my son and burning with hatred for his wife. The donors were lining up to sign checks. I saw local politicians, business tycoons, and socialites. They were buying their way into heaven, one tax-deductible donation at a time. Rebecca accepted each check with a teary smile, holding it to her chest as if it were a holy relic. "Thank you," she would whisper, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the room. "This brings us one step closer to the cure, one step closer to saving my angel." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She had created a tragedy and cast herself as the star, and everyone was buying a ticket. I adjusted my cuffs. It was time. I had spent the last 2 hours in my hotel suite undergoing a transformation. The cardigan was gone. The worn-out slacks were gone. The scruffy beard of a tired grandfather was gone, shaved clean to reveal the sharp jawline I hadn't shown the world in 20 years. I wore a bespoke Brioni suit, charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. I had bought it in Milan a lifetime ago when I was auditing a multinational shipping conglomerate. It still fit. It was a suit that commanded respect, a suit that said I was not a man to be trifled with. On my wrist sat a vintage Patek Philippe watch, and on my feet were polished leather Oxfords that cost more than Rebecca's entire fake medical binder. I walked toward the main entrance of the ballroom. I moved with a purpose, my stride long and confident. I wasn't Solomon, the confused old man, anymore. I was Solomon the auditor, the man who made CEOs sweat, the man who found the bodies buried in the numbers. A large security guard with a clipboard stepped in front of me, blocking the double doors. He was wearing an earpiece and an expression of bored authority. "Ticket, sir," he asked, not even looking me in the eye. "This is a private gala, invitation only." I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I stopped 6 inches from his face, forcing him to look up. "I am the guest of honor," I said, my voice low and smooth like polished stone. The guard frowned, checking his list. "Name." "Mr. Black," I said, using the alias I had used to wire the money. The guard scanned the list. "I don't see a Mr. Black here, sir. You need to leave." He reached out to put a hand on my chest. It was a mistake. I didn't flinch. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. The guard tensed his hand, going to his belt, but I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a card. It wasn't just a credit card. It was made of anodized titanium, black and heavy. The American Express Centurion, the black card. There are only a few thousand of them in the world. You don't apply for it. You are invited. It has no limit. It opens doors that are welded shut. I held it up. The light from the chandeliers caught the matte surface. "I am the diamond sponsor," I said. "I wired $100,000 to the foundation this morning under the name Anonymous, but I decided I wanted to see where my money was going." The guard looked at the card. He looked at my suit. He looked at my face. The boredom vanished, replaced by a sudden nervous respect. He knew what that card meant. It meant I could buy the hotel. It meant I could buy his security firm. He checked his list again, flipping to the back page. There it was. Anonymous diamond donor. $100,000. "My apologies, sir," the guard stammered, stepping aside and unhooking the velvet rope. "We weren't expecting you in person." "Please, right this way." I put the card back in my pocket. "Keep the riffraff out," I said coldly. "We don't want any interruptions." "Yes, sir." "Of course, sir." He opened the double doors for me. The sound of the gala washed over me, a wave of chatter and clinking glass. I stepped onto the plush carpet. I paused for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the brightness. The room was set up with round tables surrounding a raised stage. The table directly in front of the stage, dead center, was reserved. It had a gold placard that read "Diamond Sponsor." It was empty. I walked down the center aisle. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, inevitable pace of a storm front. Heads turned as I passed. People whispered, "Who is that? Is he a senator? Is he a billionaire?" They didn't recognize the old man they had seen in the viral video, the one being dragged away by police. They only saw the suit. They only saw the power. I reached the front table. I pulled out the chair. It scraped softly against the floor. I sat down. I was 10 feet away from Rebecca. She was standing near the edge of the stage, adjusting the blanket on Zoe's lap. She was laughing at something a donor had said. Then she sensed it. She felt the eyes on her. She looked up. Her gaze swept over the table. She saw the reserved sign. Then she saw me. The smile froze on her face. It didn't drop. It didn't vanish. It just froze, turning into a grotesque rictus of terror. Her eyes went wide. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. She looked at my clean-shaven face. She looked at the suit. She looked at the way I was sitting, legs crossed, relaxed, watching her. I saw the gears turning in her head. How he is supposed to be crazy. He is supposed to be broke. He is supposed to be scared. Tyson saw me a second later. He gasped audibly. He took a half step forward, his mouth opening to say something, to call security, to scream. But Rebecca grabbed his arm. She dug her nails into his tuxedo jacket. She hissed something in his ear. She couldn't make a scene. Not here, not now, not in front of the people who had just given her $500,000. She was trapped by her own greed. She had to pretend everything was perfect. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile I used when I found the missing zero in a ledger, the smile that meant someone was going to jail. I picked up the crystal flute of champagne waiting on the table. I raised it toward her in a silent toast. "Hello, Rebecca." She swallowed hard. Her throat worked. She looked terrifyingly pale beneath her makeup. She turned to the microphone. Her hand was shaking so badly the stand rattled. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice cracking slightly before she smoothed it over. Please take your seats. We have a very special presentation tonight. She looked at me one last time, pleading with her eyes, begging me to stay silent, begging me not to ruin her big moment. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold. It was crisp. I wasn't going to ruin her moment. I was going to let her have it. I was going to let her climb all the way to the top of the mountain she had built on lies and broken bones. And then I was going to push her off. I set the glass down. I tapped the breast pocket of my suit where the flash drive containing the stolen files was resting against my heart. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating Rebecca and the wheelchair. The crowd hushed. Go ahead, Rebecca, I thought. Tell them your story. Make them cry. Because the next story they hear is going to be mine, and it is going to scream. The spotlight hit Rebecca like a physical caress. She stood center stage, the golden sequins of her dress shimmering under the lights, a stark contrast to the small, pale figure of my granddaughter in the wheelchair beside her. Rebecca gripped the microphone with both hands, her knuckles white, her face a masterpiece of tragic beauty. She paused, letting the silence fill the room, letting the anticipation build until it was almost suffocating. My daughter is fighting a war, Rebecca began, her voice trembling just enough to sound brave but not broken. Every day I watch her fade a little more. Every day I ask God why he chose my innocent angel for this burden. She looked down at Zoe, who was slumped in the chair, her head lolling slightly to the side. Rebecca reached out and stroked Zoe's hair, or what was left of it. The audience let out a collective sigh of heartbreak. I saw women dabbing their eyes with napkins. I saw men shaking their heads in solemn sympathy. They were eating it up. They were witnessing a saint in real time. But we are not just fighting a disease. Rebecca continued, her voice hardening, gaining strength. We are fighting abandonment. We are fighting a system that failed us. And saddest of all, we are fighting a family that turned its back on us when we needed them most. She looked directly at the camera that was projecting her face onto the massive screen behind her. My husband's father, a man who should have been our rock, chose to abandon his granddaughter. He chose his money over her life. He called us liars. He tried to have us arrested. He broke our door down in a fit of rage because he could not stand to see us fighting for her survival. A murmur of outrage rippled through the room. I felt the eyes of the people at the nearby table shifting toward me, burning with judgment. They didn't know who I was yet, but they hated the man Rebecca was describing. They hated the monster she had created. But tonight, Rebecca said, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. Tonight you have restored my faith. Your generosity has given us hope. With the money raised here tonight, we can finally fly Zoe to Switzerland. We can get her the treatment she deserves. You are the family we never had. The room erupted in applause. It was a thunderous standing ovation. People were cheering, they were crying. Tyson, standing in the shadows behind Rebecca, wiped his eyes. He looked at his wife with awe. He believed her. He believed every word. The host of the evening, a local news anchor with perfect hair, walked onto the stage carrying a crystal trophy. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice booming, it is my honor to present the Mother of the Year award to the woman who never gave up, Rebecca King. Rebecca covered her mouth with her hands, feigning shock. She stepped forward to accept the award. The applause reached a crescendo. It was her moment. It was her victory lap. I didn't clap. I picked up my silver spoon. I held it over my crystal water glass, and then with a sharp, deliberate movement, I struck the glass. Cling. It wasn't a loud sound, not compared to the applause, but it was a piercing sound, a dissonant note in the symphony of adoration. I struck it again. Cling. And again. Cling. I stood up. My movement was slow, deliberate. The people at my table stopped clapping. They looked at me confused. The man to my right, a bank CEO, frowned. Sir, sit down, he hissed. I ignored him. I buttoned my jacket. I looked up at the stage. Rebecca was holding the trophy, smiling at the crowd. Then her eyes found me. She froze. The smile didn't leave her lips, but it died in her eyes. She saw the man in the charcoal suit. She saw the grandfather she thought was crazy. She saw the auditor. I raised my hand, palm open, toward the tech booth at the back of the room. It was the signal. Suddenly, a high-pitched screech of feedback tore through the sound system. The audience winced, covering their ears. Rebecca's microphone went dead. She tapped it confused, looking toward the side of the stage for help. The host's microphone went dead too. The music stopped. The ballroom fell into a stunned, heavy silence. From my breast pocket, I pulled out a small wireless microphone. Miller had given it to me in the car. He had hacked the frequency. He had taken control of the board. I brought the mic to my lips. "I have a gift for the Mother of the Year," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers louder and clearer than Rebecca's had been. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Every head in the room turned toward me. 300 people stared at the man standing alone at the front table. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Security," Rebecca screamed, her voice thin and tinny without amplification. "Get him out. That is him. That is the man who attacked us." 2 guards started to move toward me from the sides of the room, but I didn't move. I didn't run. I just pointed at the massive screen behind Rebecca. "Watch," I commanded. Miller killed the live feed of Rebecca's face. The screen went black for a heartbeat. The room held its breath. Then a video appeared. It was grainy at first, the angle low and wide. It took a moment for the audience to realize what they were seeing. It was a child's bedroom, a pink duvet, a small figure in the bed. The audio kicked in. It was crystal clear. "Drink it," a woman's voice hissed. "Drink it or no iPad." On the screen, Rebecca walked into the frame. She wasn't wearing gold sequins. She was wearing a bathrobe. She held a cup of green sludge. She grabbed Zoe's jaw. She forced her head back. The audience gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Rebecca on stage turned around. She saw herself on the giant screen towering 20 feet high. She saw herself abusing her daughter. She dropped the crystal trophy. It shattered on the stage floor, exploding into 1,000 pieces, but no one looked at it. Their eyes were glued to the screen. The video cut to another clip. Rebecca was in the kitchen. She was on the phone. She was laughing. She was holding a glass of wine. "The old man is so stupid," Rebecca's recorded voice laughed, echoing through the ballroom. "He actually thinks she is sick. He is crying about it. And Tyson is a puppy. I snap my fingers and he jumps. He doesn't have a spine." Tyson, standing on stage, took a step back. He looked at the screen. He looked at his wife. His face went gray. The video cut again. This time it was a car. Rebecca was in the passenger seat. A man was driving. He turned to look at her. It was Dr. Vance. He leaned in and kissed her. It was a long, passionate kiss. When they pulled apart, Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of cash. "Here is your cut, Tony," she said. 50,000 from the charity account. "Thanks for the new prescription. The mercaptopurine is working wonders. She looks like a ghost. Just don't kill her yet." Dr. Vance laughed. "She is our golden goose." "Don't worry," Rebecca replied, counting the money. "I will keep her breathing until we hit 1,000,000. Then nature can take its course." The video ended. The screen went black. For 5 seconds, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The horror of what they had just seen and heard hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They had just watched a mother poison her child. They had just heard her plot her daughter's death for money. They had seen the doctor they trusted conspiring to commit murder. Then the screaming started. It wasn't Rebecca screaming, it was the audience. A woman in the front row stood up and hurled her wine glass at the stage. It smashed against the podium. "Monster," she shrieked. "You monster!" Pandemonium broke out. Chairs were overturned. People were shouting, pointing, surging toward the stage. The veneer of civilization had cracked. The wealthy donors, the politicians, the socialites, they weren't polite anymore. They were a mob. They had been duped. They had been made accomplices to torture, and they wanted blood. Rebecca stood frozen center stage. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the audience, then she looked at me. Her eyes were wide with a terror so profound it looked like madness. She mouthed a word, but no sound came out. No. I looked at her. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stared at her with the cold, hard eyes of the auditor who had finally balanced the books. "It is over, Rebecca," I said into my microphone. "The lie is over." Tyson moved then. He didn't move toward me. He didn't move toward the exit. He moved toward his wife. He walked across the stage, his steps heavy and slow. He looked at Rebecca. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had defended against his own father. Rebecca reached out for him. "Tyson, baby. It is fake. It is AI. He made it up. Tyson didn't speak. He reached out and grabbed the wig she was wearing to make her hair look thinner, to make her look like a stressed, grieving mother. He yanked it off. Underneath her hair was thick and lustrous. The final prop fell away. Rebecca screamed, trying to cover her head, trying to hide. But there was nowhere to hide. The lights were on, the camera was rolling, and the whole world was watching. Duide la fan vit lai tu fan mui mot den fan mui bak o kit band aduk bo sung de du do ko ngat ngi dung ngu fap ting ang de zong duk AI kate trin tai kam suk tot nyat. Turn it off! Rebecca screamed, her voice shredding the stunned silence of the ballroom like a serrated knife. It is fake. It is all fake. He is using AI. He is using deepfakes to frame me. She stood center stage, her chest heaving, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route that did not exist. The video on the massive screen behind her had frozen on the image of her handing cash to Dr. Vance, but the audio seemed to echo in the corners of the room, repeating her laughter, repeating her cold calculation of my granddaughter's life. "You are all idiots if you believe this," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at the donors who were staring at her with mouths agape. "He is a senile old man. He is jealous. He wants my money. He is mentally unstable. Look at him. He is enjoying this." I stood my ground at the front table, calm and immovable. I did not need to shout. The truth was shouting for me. I simply held up the flash drive, the physical evidence of her depravity. "It is not AI, Rebecca," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone in my hand. "It is you. It is your voice. It is your face. And it is your soul laid bare for everyone to see." She let out a primal sound of rage, a guttural growl that sounded nothing like the polished mother of the year she had pretended to be for so long. She saw me standing there, the architect of her destruction, and she snapped. She abandoned her post by the wheelchair. She abandoned the pretense of the grieving mother, and she lunged. She ran toward the stairs leading down from the stage, her eyes fixed on the microphone in my hand. She wanted to silence me. She wanted to destroy the evidence. She moved with a reckless speed, her high heels clacking violently against the wood of the stage. "I am going to kill you!" she screamed, launching herself off the last step toward me. "Give me that mic." But in her blind fury, she forgot about the long, flowing train of her gold-sequined gown. Her heel caught in the fabric just as she leaped. She did not reach me. She did not even get close. She crashed onto the floor of the ballroom with a bone-jarring thud, landing face first at the feet of the bank CEO who had tried to silence me earlier. She slid across the polished floor, her arms flailing, trying to break her fall, but it was too late. And then the final layer of her disguise came undone. As she hit the ground, the impact dislodged the expensive brunette wig she had been wearing. The wig she used to make her hair look thinning and stressed. The wig she used to sell the image of a mother who was falling apart from grief. It slid off her head like a dead animal, revealing the thick, lustrous hair underneath, perfectly styled and healthy. The ballroom gasped. It was a collective sound of shock and revulsion. Rebecca scrambled to her knees, reaching for the wig, trying to cover her head, trying to pull the lie back together, but it was gone. The wig lay on the carpet, a limp testament to her fraud. She looked up, her real hair falling around her face, her makeup smeared, and for the first time the donors saw her naked, not literally but spiritually. They saw the actress without her costume. They saw the fraud. "Look at her hair," a woman at the next table whispered loud enough to be heard. "She isn't stressed. She isn't grieving. It was all a costume." Rebecca clutched the wig to her chest, tears of rage streaming down her face. "It is not what you think," she sobbed, looking around at the sea of hostile faces. "I wear it because I pull my hair out from stress. It is a condition." "Stop it, Rebecca," I said, my voice cutting through her sobbing like a whip. "Stop lying. The show is over." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the thick envelope containing the toxicology report and the stolen medical journal. I held them high so the entire room could see them clearly. "You want to know why my granddaughter looks like a ghost?" I asked the room, turning to face the crowd. "I did not use AI. I used science." I opened the envelope and pulled out the toxicology report. I walked toward the nearest camera, ensuring the text was visible on the giant screen. "This is a hair follicle test," I said, my voice steady and cold. "It was taken yesterday from Zoe's head. It tested positive for high levels of laxatives. That is why she is starving. That is why she cannot keep food down. But that is not the worst of it. I flipped the page. The word mercaptopurin was highlighted in neon yellow. This is mercaptopurin, I announced. The room fell deadly silent. This is a chemotherapy drug. It is used to treat leukemia. It destroys the immune system. It causes hair loss. It causes organ failure. My granddaughter does not have cancer. She has never had cancer, but her mother has been feeding her this poison every single day. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just shock anymore, it was fury. Men were standing up, their faces red with anger. Women were covering their mouths, tears streaming down their faces. They had given money to save a child, and now they realized they had funded her torture. She did not do it for love. I continued pulling out the bank ledgers Miller and I had stolen. I threw them onto the table next to the wig. She did it for this. I pointed a finger at Rebecca, who was still on her knees, trembling. She did it to buy the Hermes bag she has stashed in her dressing room. She did it to pay off her gambling debts. She did it to pay her lover, Dr. Vance, to write fake prescriptions. She poisoned her own daughter to buy a lifestyle she could not afford. She turned my granddaughter into a human ATM machine. "Liar!" Rebecca screamed, lunging for my legs. "You are a liar!" Someone from the crowd threw a bread roll. It hit Rebecca in the shoulder. Then a wine glass flew through the air, shattering near her feet. Red wine splashed onto her gold dress, looking like blood. "Get her out of here," a man shouted. "Call the police! She is a monster!" a woman yelled, throwing her program at Rebecca. The room was turning into a mob. The polite society veneer had completely evaporated. They saw a child killer in their midst, and they wanted justice. Rebecca looked around, her eyes, wild panic setting in. She scrambled backward, crab walking away from me, away from the angry donors. She looked toward the stage, toward the only person she thought she could still manipulate. "Tyson, help me!" she screamed, reaching out a hand toward him. "They are crazy! Help your wife!" I looked at my son. He was still standing on the stage next to the wheelchair. He hadn't moved since the video started. He stood like a statue, his face pale as ash. He was looking at the screen where the toxicology report was still displayed. Then he looked down at Zoe. Zoe was awake now. The noise had roused her from her sedated stupor. She was looking around, terrified, her eyes wide and glassy. She looked at the angry crowd. She looked at her mother on the floor, and she started to cry. It was a weak, thin sound, a sound of pure misery. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but in the silence of the stage it sounded like a thunderclap. "I am scared." Tyson looked at his daughter. He looked at her thin arms, her sunken cheeks, the hair that was falling out not because of stress but because of poison. He looked at the wheelchair she didn't need. He looked at the life he had built on a foundation of lies. Then he looked at Rebecca. His face changed. The confusion, the fear, the weakness, it all vanished. In its place came a look of such profound horror and realization that it aged him 10 years in a single second. The spell was broken. The brainwashing shattered under the weight of the undeniable truth. He walked down the stairs of the stage. He moved slowly like a man walking through deep water. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the donors. He only had eyes for Rebecca. "Tyson, baby, please," Rebecca pleaded, getting to her feet, clutching his arm as he approached. Tell them, I am a good mother. Tell them we are fighting for her." Tyson stopped in front of her. He looked down at her hand on his arm, the hand that had mixed the poison, the hand that had slapped his daughter, the hand that had taken the money. He reached out and removed her hand from his sleeve. He did it gently, almost delicately, as if he were removing a poisonous spider. "You knew," he said. His voice was a whisper, but in the hush of the room, everyone heard it. "You knew she wasn't sick. You made her sick." "No, Tyson, listen to me." She started desperate, her eyes manic. "You made me believe she was dying." Tyson continued, his voice rising, shaking with a rage that had been buried for years. "I held her hand while she cried in pain. I watched her fade away, and I thanked you for taking care of her. I worshipped you for being so strong, and all this time, you were the one killing her." He stepped closer to her, invading her space, forcing her back. "You made me hate my father," he said, tears streaming down his face. "You made me throw him out of our house. You made me believe he was crazy because he was the only one who saw you, the only one who saw the devil." Rebecca's face twisted. The mask of the victim fell away, completely replaced by a sneer of pure venom. He is a useless old man, she spat suddenly, vicious, cornered, and dangerous. And you are pathetic, Tyson. You never had a spine. I did what I had to do because you could never provide the life I deserved. I did it for us. She raised her hand to slap him, just as she had slapped Zoe so many times. It was a reflex, a way to assert dominance, a way to regain control. But Tyson was not a puppy anymore. He caught her wrist mid-air. His grip was iron. He twisted her arm away, stopping the blow inches from his face. "No!" he roared. The sound came from deep in his chest, a primal scream of a father who had failed to protect his cub but would not fail again. He shoved her. It wasn't a gentle push. He put his weight into it, releasing years of manipulation and lies. Rebecca stumbled backward, her heels slipping on the wine-soaked floor. She fell hard, landing on her backside, sliding across the parquet. "You are not a mother," Tyson shouted, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You are not a wife. You are a demon. You are a sickness, and I am cutting you out." Rebecca stared up at him, stunned into silence. She had never seen him like this. She had never seen the man underneath the husband she had broken. She looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for a way out, but there was none. The doors were blocked by security. The crowd was closing in. And her husband, the one person she thought she owned, stood over her like an avenging angel. I stepped forward then, coming to stand beside my son. I put a hand on his shoulder. He was shaking, vibrating with adrenaline and grief. "It is over, son," I said quietly. "It is over." Tyson looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears and shame. "Dad," he choked out. "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." "I know," I said, tightening my grip on his shoulder. "But now you do. And now we finish this." I looked at the security guards who were waiting for my signal. I nodded toward Rebecca, who was trying to crawl away like a broken spider. "Hold her," I commanded. "Do not let her leave this room. The police are already at the door." The double doors at the back of the ballroom did not just open. They exploded inward, slamming against the walls with a violence that shook the crystal chandeliers. Detective Miller stepped through, first his badge hanging from his neck, catching the light. Behind him, a phalanx of uniformed officers flooded into the room, moving with precision and speed. "Police, everyone stay where you are," a voice boomed over the chaos. The angry mob of donors froze. The security guards who had been holding Rebecca stepped back, their hands raised, yielding to the higher authority. Rebecca stood alone in the center of the stage, her chest heaving, her eyes wild and darting. I watched from my table, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The moment I had been working toward since the day I cut open that teddy bear. Rebecca looked at the police, then she looked at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She realized in that second that there was no way out. There was no charm offensive that could save her now. There were no lies big enough to cover the mountain of evidence I had just dumped on the world. "Officer down here," I called out, pointing at the stage. "That is her. That is the woman." Miller marched down the center aisle, ignoring the gasps of the socialites and the whispers of the politicians. He walked straight up the stairs onto the stage. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted in the stage lights, cold and final. "Rebecca King," he said, his voice flat and professional. "You are under arrest for child abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "No," Rebecca shrieked, backing away until she bumped into the podium. "You cannot arrest me. I am the mother of the year. I am a victim. He is lying. That old man is lying." Miller didn't argue. He didn't debate. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, spinning her around with a practiced efficiency. She fought him, kicking and screaming like a feral cat. Her nails clawed at his jacket, but he was a boulder immovable. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It cut through her screams. It cut through the murmurs of the crowd. It was the sound of justice. At the same time, a commotion erupted near the service entrance at the side of the ballroom. I turned to look. 2 officers were dragging a man back into the room. He was struggling, dropping a heavy leather satchel onto the floor. The bag burst open and bundles of cash spilled out onto the carpet, thousands of dollars bound in rubber bands. It was Dr. Vance. He had tried to run. He had tried to take the money and leave his partner to burn, but Miller had anticipated that. He had stationed men at every exit. I looked at Vance. His face was pale, sweating profusely. He looked at Rebecca in handcuffs, then at the money on the floor, then at me. He knew it was over. He slumped in the grip of the officers. His arrogance deflated like a punctured tire. "Get him out of here," Miller ordered, gesturing to his team. "Get them both out." As the officers began to march Rebecca across the stage toward the stairs, she stopped fighting physically, but her spirit was not broken. It was twisted. She locked eyes with me. Her makeup was ruined. Her hair was a mess, but her gaze was laser-focused. She didn't cry for mercy. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't look at her daughter, who was sobbing quietly in the wheelchair a few feet away. She looked only at me, the architect of her downfall. "You old bastard!" she screamed, her voice raw and guttural, tearing her throat. "You dead old man, you ruined everything! We were so close!" The crowd recoiled in horror. The mask of the saintly mother was gone, replaced by the face of a demon. She wasn't sorry for hurting her child. She was sorry she got caught. She was furious that her payday had been snatched away. "I will kill you," she howled, straining against the cuffs, spitting as she spoke. "I will get out of here, and I will burn you alive. You think you won. You didn't win anything. You are just a lonely, pathetic old man with his ledgers. I hope you die alone, Solomon. I hope you rot." The cameras were still rolling. The live feed I had hijacked was still broadcasting. The news crews who had been covering the gala were now filming the arrest. The entire world was watching Rebecca King, the mother of the year, threaten to murder her father-in-law while being arrested for poisoning her child. It was the final nail in her coffin. Her lawyers could never argue insanity or misunderstanding now. The malice was naked. It was public. It was permanent. I stood there impassive, letting her hate wash over me like water off a stone. I didn't say a word back. I didn't need to. Her rage was my vindication. Every curse she spat proved I was right, proved that she was exactly what I said she was. The officers dragged her down the stairs. She kicked out, knocking over a flower arrangement, sending water and lilies crashing to the floor. She was still screaming as they hauled her up the aisle past the donors she had duped, past the husband she had betrayed. "You are nothing," she shrieked, her voice fading as they reached the doors. "Nothing." And then she was gone. The double doors swung shut, cutting off her voice. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing in the ears. I looked at Dr. Vance. He didn't say anything. He just hung his head shamefaced as they led him out the side door. The money was gathered up and bagged, evidence of a crime that had almost cost a little girl her life. I turned my attention back to the stage, to the wreckage of the family I had tried to save. Tyson was on his knees. He had collapsed near the podium, his body shaking with silent sobs. He wasn't looking at the exit where his wife had just been taken. He was looking at the floor as if hoping it would open up and swallow him whole. Zoe sat in her wheelchair, frozen in terror, watching her father. She looked small and fragile, lost in the chaos. I walked up the stairs. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But I couldn't stop yet. There was one more thing to do. I walked over to Tyson. I stood over him, looking down at the top of his head. I saw the gray hair starting to show amongst the black. I saw the slump of his shoulders, the defeat in his posture. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my trousers. He didn't look up. He just clung to the fabric like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. "Dad!" He choked out, his voice thick with tears. "Dad, please. I am so sorry. I didn't see it. I was blind. She was so convincing. I love you, Dad. Please forgive me. It would have been easy to kneel down. It would have been easy to put my arms around him, to tell him it was okay to say that he was a victim too. That is what a father is supposed to do, right? Forgive. Protect." But I looked at Zoe. I looked at her thin arms, her sunken eyes, the IV bruise on her hand. I thought about the nights she spent hungry, the nights she spent in pain while her father slept in the next room, oblivious, willfully ignorant. He had chosen his wife over his daughter. He had chosen the easy lie over the hard truth. He had thrown me out of his house when I tried to warn him. He had called me crazy. He had threatened me with the police. Weakness is not a crime, but it has consequences. And the consequence of his weakness was almost a small coffin. I reached down and pried his fingers off my leg. My grip was firm, cold. "Stand up, Tyson," I said, my voice hard. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears, his eyes pleading. "Dad, stand up," I repeated louder. I will not have a son of mine groveling on a stage, not after what you let happen." Tyson scrambled to his feet, wiping his face, trying to compose himself. He looked like a child who had broken a window, scared and ashamed. "Do not apologize to me," I said, pointing at Zoe. "Apologize to her. She is the one who paid the price for your blindness. She is the one who starved while you ate dinner. She is the one who was poisoned while you slept." Tyson turned to look at Zoe. He took a step toward her but stopped. He looked at his hands as if they were dirty. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't face her." "Then you are not a father," I said. "You are just a sperm donor." I walked past him. I went to the wheelchair. I knelt down so I was eye level with my granddaughter. She flinched when I got close, expecting another slap, expecting more pain. "Hey, sweet pea," I whispered, soft and gentle. "It is over. The bad medicine is gone. The cameras are gone. It is just Grandpa." Zoe looked at me, her lip trembling. "Grandpa," she squeaked. "Is Mommy coming back?" "No, baby," I said, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "Mommy is going away for a long time. She can't hurt you anymore. You are safe." "Can I have a burger?" she asked, her voice so small it broke my heart into a million pieces. I smiled, tears finally welling in my own eyes. "Yes, baby. You can have a burger. You can have pizza. You can have whatever you want." I stood up and took the handles of the wheelchair. I turned to Tyson. "I am taking her," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Tyson looked at me, startled. "You can't? I am her father." "Not right now, you are not," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are a witness. You are a suspect until they clear you. And more importantly, you are a man who needs to figure out how he let this happen under his own roof." "I am filing for emergency custody," I continued. "I have the lawyers, I have the money, and I have the proof. Do not fight me on this, Tyson. Do not make me destroy you too." Tyson looked at me, then at Zoe. He slumped defeated. He knew I was right. He knew he wasn't fit to take care of a goldfish right now, let alone a traumatized child. "Take her," he whispered. "Take her somewhere safe." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I pushed the wheelchair across the stage, down the ramp, and up the center aisle. The crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. They watched in silence, respect and shame mingling on their faces. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and into the cool night air. The sirens were fading in the distance. The flashing lights were gone. It was just me and Zoe. I lifted her out of the wheelchair and into the back of my car. She was so light it was terrifying. I buckled her in. "Grandpa," she said as I got into the driver's seat. "Are we going home?" "We are going to my home, Zoe," I said, starting the engine. "To the place with the teddy bear. And tomorrow we start a new life." I drove away, leaving the ruins of the gala behind me. I had won. The war was over. But as I looked at my granddaughter in the rearview mirror, I knew the rebuilding was just beginning. 6 months is a long time in the life of a child, but in the slow, grinding gears of the justice system, it is the blink of an eye. However, thanks to the mountain of evidence Miller and I provided, the mountain of evidence Rebecca herself provided with her arrogance, justice moved swiftly. The sentencing hearing was not a gala. There were no gold sequins, no champagne, and no applause. There was only the cold, hard reality of a courtroom, fluorescent lights, and a judge who had seen the video of a mother poisoning her child. Rebecca stood before the bench in a prison-issued orange jumpsuit. Her roots were showing dark against the blonde dye job she hadn't been able to maintain. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the hard lines of bitterness that had always been there underneath. The judge didn't mince words. He called her crimes heinous, calculated, and devoid of humanity. He sentenced her to 25 years in a maximum security federal prison. No parole for at least 20. She didn't scream this time. She didn't fight. She just stared at the table in front of her, her eyes empty, void of the light she had stolen from my granddaughter. When the bailiffs led her away, she didn't look back. She was already gone, lost in the prison of her own narcissism. Dr. Vance got 15 years. He tried to cut a deal, tried to trade information on other clients, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. They wanted the man who wrote the script for a child's slow death. He was stripped of his medical license, his assets were seized to pay restitution to the charity donors, and he was sent to a facility where the only thing he would be cutting was time. And then there was Tyson. My son wasn't in an orange jumpsuit. He stood in the back of the courtroom wearing a cheap suit he had bought at a thrift store because his bank accounts were frozen. He looked older, thinner, broken. He wasn't going to prison. The district attorney decided that while he was negligent, he wasn't a co-conspirator. He hadn't known about the poison. He had just been too weak to see it. But freedom has its own price. The judge stripped him of custody. He granted me full permanent guardianship of Zoe until she turns 18. Tyson was given supervised visitation rights 2 hours a week in a government building with a social worker present. But the real punishment came from the thousands of donors who had been duped. They wanted their money back. Tyson was legally responsible for the debts incurred by his wife. The court ordered him to pay back every cent of the $500,000 raised at the gala, plus the money stolen from the earlier donations. He came to me after the sentencing, weeping, begging. "Dad," he said, "please, I can't pay this. I will be in debt for the rest of my life. Just write a check. You have millions. It is nothing to you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown a key at my chest and told me I was dead to him. "No," I said. "But why?" he cried. "It is pocket change for you." "It is not about the money, Tyson," I told him. "It is about the lesson. You led a wolf into the sheep pen because she was pretty and because she told you what you wanted to hear. You let her eat your daughter because you were too cowardly to ask questions. You need to learn what it feels like to carry a burden. You need to learn what it feels like to work for your salvation." I walked away, leaving him standing on the courthouse steps alone. He got a job the next day doing manual labor at a landscaping company. It is hard work. It is honest work. And for the first time in his life, he is doing it without a safety net. The real victory, however, didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in my backyard. I bought a new house, a big one with a sprawling green lawn and high fences to keep the world out. It is in a quiet neighborhood far away from the cameras and the noise. And in the middle of that lawn right now, there is a miracle taking place. Zoe is on a bicycle. 6 months ago, she couldn't walk across a room without getting winded. She weighed 42 pounds. She was a ghost haunting her own life. Today, she is 60 pounds of solid energy. Her hair has grown back a thick halo of dark curls that bounce when she moves. Her cheeks are round and pink, flushed with health and the autumn air. She is wearing a helmet and knee pads, and she is gripping the handlebars with a determination that reminds me of myself. She wobbles the front wheel, jerking left and right. "Don't let go, Grandpa!" she screams, laughing and terrified at the same time. "Don't let go!" I am running beside her, my hand resting lightly on the back of the seat. I am 71 years old and my knees ache when it rains, but right now I feel like I could run a marathon. "I got you, sweet pea," I say, puffing a little. "I got you." But I don't have her. Not really. My hand is hovering an inch above the seat. She is doing it herself. She is pedaling her legs, pumping, driving the chain, pushing her forward. She is flying. "Look at me," she shouts. "Look at me, Grandpa. I am doing it." She is riding a bike, something Rebecca told her she would never do because her bones were too brittle, because her heart was too weak. It was all lies, just like the gluten, just like the allergies. She rides in circles around the garden, laughing that deep belly laugh that only happy children have. She crashes into a pile of leaves and tumbles off the bike. For a second, I freeze, the old fear spiking in my chest. Is she hurt? Will she break? But she just rolls over, leaves stuck in her hair, and giggles. "I am okay," she yells, jumping back up. "I am okay." I watch her, and I feel a peace settle over me, a peace deeper than the ocean. We spent months detoxing her system, watching the numbers on the toxicology report slowly drop, watching the color return to her skin. We spent nights where she woke up screaming from nightmares about green medicine, and I held her until she fell back asleep. But we made it. She is not a victim anymore. She is a survivor. She is a warrior, but a real one, not the fake one her mother created for Instagram. "Come on in, Zoe," I call out. It is getting cold, and I made dinner. "Burgers," she asks, hopeful. "Steak and potatoes," I say. "And maybe ice cream for dessert." "Yes." She pumps her fist and runs toward the house, leaving the bike in the grass. She doesn't walk like an old woman anymore. She runs like a child who has catching up to do. I stay in the garden for a moment longer, watching the sun go down. The air is crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. I turn and walk back to the house, to the study where I keep my new safe. I sit down at the mahogany desk and pull out a heavy document bound in blue paper. It is my last will and testament, revised and updated this morning by Steinberg. I open it to the distribution clause. I, Solomon King, hereby leave 100% of my estate, including all real property, cash, assets, stocks, and offshore holdings, to the Zoe King Trust. I trace the words with my finger. It is a lot of money. It is enough to ruin a person if they aren't ready for it. It is enough to attract sharks like Rebecca. That is why the conditions are there etched in stone. The beneficiary, Zoe King, shall not access the principal of the trust until she reaches the age of 25, and only upon the successful completion of a 4-year university degree from an accredited institution. I want her to learn the value of work just like I did. I want her to build her own character before she inherits the kingdom. And then there is the clause for Tyson. It was the hardest part to write, but it was the most necessary. To my son, Tyson King, I leave nothing. It looks harsh on paper. It looks cruel. But I read the addendum underneath. Unless he can provide proof of 5 consecutive years of gainful employment independent of family assistance. Unless he can prove full repayment of all debts incurred by his former spouse. And unless he can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the trustee that he is engaged in consistent therapy to address his dependency and lack of agency. If he can do that, if he can build a spine, if he can become a man, then he gets a stipend. A small one, just enough to know I am proud of him. But he will never get the bulk. The bulk is for Zoe. The bulk is for the one who suffered. I close the will and lock it in the safe. I spin the dial, hearing the tumblers click. It is done. The fortress is built. The walls are high. I stand up and walk to the window, looking out at the darkening street. The reflection in the glass shows an old man, white hair, dark skin lines etched deep around the eyes. But the eyes are clear. The eyes are sharp. I look past my reflection. I look at you, the viewer. The person who has been listening to this story, wondering if it is real, wondering if people like Rebecca really exist. They do. They are out there in your neighborhoods, in your schools, in your families. They hide behind smiles and filters and fake tears. They prey on the weak and the trusting. They mistake kindness for blindness. But they forget one thing. They forget that the sheepdogs are still watching. They forget that there are men like me, men who have lived long enough to know the smell of a lie, men who aren't afraid to burn down the house to save the child inside. So listen to me closely. Do not ever underestimate a father. Do not ever underestimate a grandfather. We are not just old men sitting in rocking chairs. We are the guardians at the gate. And if you come for our blood, if you try to hurt the ones we love, we will not just stop you. We will end you. I am Solomon King, and I am watching. I turn away from the window. The smell of steak is wafting from the kitchen. My granddaughter is waiting for me. I have a dinner to cook. I have a bike tire to fix tomorrow. And I have a life to live, a real life full of noise and mess and truth. I walk out of the study and turn off the light. The room goes dark, but the house is full of light. People often say that blood is thicker than water. They use it as a shield to excuse abuse, to demand loyalty where none is deserved. But I learned the hard way that blood is just biology. Loyalty is a choice. Love is an action. When you see something wrong, even if it is in your own home, even if it is your own kin, you have a moral obligation to burn it down to save the innocent. Silence is not peace. It is complicity. My legacy isn't the millions in the bank or the buildings I own. It is the smile on my granddaughter's face as she rides her bike. Protect your pack, even if you have to fight the wolves in your own kitchen. If this story chilled you to the bone, hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that the truth matters. And tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered a secret that shattered your family? I read every single one. Until next time, stay vigilant.